So hello, welcome everybody to this meeting of the full council of Portsmouth City Council held in the council chamber of the Guildhall. First of all, can I welcome the very right Reverend and Honourable Dr. Anthony Kane, the Dean of Portsmouth, who will say a prayer. Now I have to turn you on, don't I?
Appreciated. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. So on this Armistice Day, to begin with words used here on Remembrance Sunday, ever-living God, we remember those whom you have gathered from the storm of war into the peace of your presence. May that same peace calm our fears, bring justice to all peoples, and establish harmony among the nations. And we pray to God for this city of Portsmouth and all who live and work here, for the work of the Lord Mayor and councillors, for all who bear responsibility for our common life, for all members of the armed forces, especially those deployed from this city. And finally, we pray for wisdom and discernment in all that is said at this council meeting, for mutual respect and courtesy, all in the service of others, and that heaven's light may be our guide. Amen.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Dr. Kane. You're very welcome to stay for the next 93 hours, or we'll understand if you need to leave slightly earlier.
Thank you. I'll stay for
Thank you. If everybody else would like to take a seat. Thanks very much, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this meeting of Portsmouth City Council. For the attention of members of the public wishing to record proceedings, the council rules prohibit the filming or photographing or recording of members of the public, including those making deputations, but you are free to film members of the council. Colleagues, there's no fire alarm expected today, so if there is one, it is real. Please evacuate, and we'll meet at Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. Colleagues, I'm sure you know by now, if you want to speak, please indicate with your microphone, and your face flashes up in front of me. And then when you finish speaking, I will turn your microphone off. Now, moving to item 1 of the council agenda today, declarations of interest. Colleagues, have we any interests that colleagues need to declare? Nope, that's it. Thank you very much. Item 2 is minutes of the previous council meeting held on 23rd of September. It's proposed by Councillor Steve Pitt and seconded by Councillor Graham Heaney that the minutes of that meeting are confirmed as a correct record. Are the minutes agreed? Thank you, colleagues. Item 3, apologies for absence. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Charlotte Gerarda. Councillor Gerarda wishes me to explain the reason for her absence, which I'm sorry to inform you is to allow her to take some time to recover following a miscarriage. I'm sure that I speak for all of us when I send our best wishes and our sincere condolences to her for her loss. The notice of motion in her name, titled Tackling Antisocial Behaviour Issues in Portsmouth, will therefore not be put at this meeting and instead considered at the December full council meeting. A written response will be supplied to her question to the Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education. I've also got apologies for lateness and possible absence from Councillor Emily Strudwick. Any other apologies? Councillor Fielding.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Tom Coles is currently attending QA for an acute head injury and will hopefully be attending later, but we understand if he's unable to attend.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Pitt.
Apologies from Councillor Dave Ashmore, who's unwell.
Thank you.
Yeah, just apologies for our slightly late arrival. We just had to wait for the care cover to come in.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Bosher.
Apologies from Councillor Hannah Hockaday. She'll be unable to attend today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Simpson.
such a combo here. I've got apologies from Derek North, who's had to rush off with his mother, not very well. Lee Tyndall is running late, Councillor Tyndall's running late, and I need to leave around 3ish from doctor's appointment myself.
Thank you very much indeed. We've also got apologies for Councillor Brent and Councillor North. No, Dunn North, Corkery, sorry. Councillor Fazackley, you're looking mystified. Have I done something wrong? Hannah Hockaday stroke Brent. Well, anyway, we know who she is. Okay. I think that's apologies. Now let me get to my paperwork. Okay. Oh, and there's tea. Whoa. Thank you very much, Heather. I think that's it for that. So in terms of moving on, item 4 is communications. The first is to welcome Councillor Joe Standen to join us at the council. It's very good to see you and welcome here, and hope you have a good time with us. And the second is a sadder thing, is to let people know officially of the death of Jim Patey. Jim was Lord Mayor in 1992 and a councillor for Fratton Ward and Paulsgrove between 1976 and 2014. So he did a long stint. His funeral is at St Michael and All Angels, and I can't remember the date of... Sorry, Graham?
It's 21st of November.
21st of November, and I'm sure that I shall be there as Lord Mayor, but I'm sure other members will wish to attend, and I'm sure the family will be very pleased to see us. Okay, moving on to item 5, the agenda, deputations from the public, understanding order 24. There are 2 deputations, both from the same person, Chelsea Scutt, and I'm going to ask Chelsea to do them one at a time. Chelsea, you get 6 minutes each. Peter here will buzzer when you've got a minute left, just to make sure that you're okay. Okay, so the first one is on item 11D, notice of motion, digital IDs. Chelsea, you have 6 minutes. The floor is yours.
My Lord Mayor, I am speaking today to oppose the proposed introduction of mandatory digital IDs. While intended to modernise identification, this scheme would disproportionately disadvantage some of the most vulnerable members of society. People with disabilities, the elderly and those living in poverty. For many, access to the necessary technology is limited. For others, the cost of acquiring and maintaining such a system would be prohibitive. Implementing a mandatory digital ID scheme risks excluding these individuals from everyday activities, from accessing essential services to participating fully in civic life. Moreover, we already have multiple forms of identifications available: passports, driving licence and other government-issued documents. These already serve the same purpose without introducing the risks inherent in a centralised digital system. Mandatory digital IDs create an unprecedented threat to personal privacy and data security. Centralised databases are vulnerable to misuse, hacking and surveillance, and would store sensitive information on millions of people, many of whom have no ability to opt out. This proposal also fails to consider the practical realities of inclusion and accessibility. Disabled individuals, those with cognitive impairments, those lacking digital literacy would be forced into a system that is inherently more difficult for them to navigate. The poorest in society, who already face barriers in education, healthcare and financial services, would face further marginalisation. In addition, mandatory digital IDs risk creating a society in which access to basic services becomes contingent on technology, rather than addressing the root challenges of inclusion and equality. The cost, complexity and privacy risks of this proposal far outweigh any potential benefits, and it is likely to have the greatest impact on those who are least able to bear it. For these reasons, I urge councillors to formally oppose this proposal and advocate for solutions that would improve service access, security and identity verification without marginalising vulnerable citizens.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very good, and thank you for being very quick. I'm sure some of our colleagues here could learn lots from you. So your second deputation, thank you very much, is on 11F, notice of motion, fair and transparent allocation of asylum dispersal, protecting Portsmouth housing and public services. Chelsea, the floor is yours.
My Lord Mayor, I am speaking today to oppose the proposed motion regarding asylum dispersal in Portsmouth. While the motion frames itself as defending local resources, it fundamentally misdiagnoses the problem. The motion implies that housing pressure stems from refugees being placed in HMOs, but landlords act privately and have long been discriminating against disabled people, low-income families and benefit claimants. Blaming asylum seekers for housing shortages scapegoats a vulnerable minority, rather than addressing structural issues. Portsmouth faces a chronic housing shortage, and even if every refugee were removed and no new asylum seekers were accepted, the same problems, homelessness, inadequate housing, community violence, would remain. Instead of targeting a minority group, the Council's energy should focus on practical, systemic solutions, investing in long-term housing, addressing homelessness, and tackling violent and sexual crimes. In short, this motion proposes symbolic restrictions rather than meaningful solutions, misattributes blame, and risks undermining our city's commitment to human dignity and inclusion. I urge councillors to vote against this motion and redirect attention and resources towards addressing the root causes of our housing and community challenges.
Thank you very much indeed, Chelsea. Can I ask you now to take a seat up in the gallery? But thank you for your time. Colleagues, many of you will also have noticed that former Councillor Madgwick is also here with us, and I'm sure we'll all want to wish you well, Brian, and to thank you for your time on the Council. Okay, moving forward to agenda item 6, which is questions from the public, understanding Order 25. There are no such questions. Then item 7, appointments. Members, we've got a report before us containing 29 appointments to agree and 10 to note. Of these recommendations, 7 in brackets Roman 7 in respect of the gifted Conservative group seat on the Planning Committee is open from nominations from the floor. My understanding is this is, and Councillor Bosher will tell me if I'm wrong, is that you've indicated no preference and have left this open for nominations. Is that correct, Councillor Bosher?
That is correct, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. There's also then in the papers, in the Green Papers, a thing where the PIP group have gifted their seat on the Planning Committee to Reform. And as I understand it, Chris Dyke is going to be filling that space. Is that right, James? Yep. No? Oh, there's a question. No, there's James. Yeah, George is nodding, and that means the PIP group is doing what it's told. Good. That's great. So we go back to the Conservative. Open nomination. So I'm asked to open nominations. Colleagues, have we any nominations to serve on that? Councillor Heaney, are you volunteering to serve?
Unfortunately, I can't because my teaching is on a Wednesday morning.
I am
going to nominate my colleague, Councillor Adeniran, to be the member.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Is there a seconder for the only nomination? Okay. Councillor Valady, are you wanting to put forward a nomination? You were waving?
No, I was just...
Okay. Okay. Are there any other nominations, ladies and gentlemen? No, Yinka, you've got the dodgy seat on the Planning Committee. Welcome to it. I'm sure you'll have fun with it.
Oh, okay. just to experience it and see.
Okay, but as former chair of the Planning Committee, it's an interesting one to do. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let's have a look in my script where we get to now. Urgent business, item 8. There's no urgent business. Oh, no, hold on. Sorry. We've got to go back to all the rest of the recommendations. Colleagues, are you happy with all the other recommendations, nominations and noting as in the report? So we don't need a proposer and a seconder, do you, James? Okay, could 2 people put their hands up, please? Darren and Jason. All those in favour of everything in the report, please show. Thank you. There can't be any against because that was everybody. Are you happy, James? Good. Item 8, urgent business. There isn't any. Now we're moving to, we've got 2 items that come from us from Cabinet. The first is the Youth Justice Strategic Plan 2025-27 and receive the recommendations from the Cabinet. Colleagues, you know that, well, Councillor Standen won't, but everybody else knows if you want to object to this or question it, or somebody needs to say something in a moment, otherwise, if everybody's happy, it just goes through. So, colleagues, is anybody wanting to object or want to question the Portsmouth Youth Justice Strategic Plan when Councillor Sanders, was that objecting?
Absolutely not.
Excellent. Councillor Pitt?
Also not objecting, Lord Mayor, but could you please call the minute?
I have. But if you wish to, I now propose to call the minute. If you wish to either question or oppose the minute, please indicate by standing and calling out either question or object once it's been called the minute. Can I also remind members that any item that has no objections made will be deemed to have been approved. I call minute 63. Everybody happy? Great. Moving on. Now moving on to item 10, draft pre-submission Portsmouth local plan addendum. Same rule applies. And so I'm going to call Cabinet minute 65. Anybody wishes to object or question? No? Okay. Thank you. That then goes through. I did promise Ian I was going to put his right at the last part of the agenda, but I've clearly forgotten. So, Ian, you're able to go now. Okay, we now move on to notices of motion. 7 notices of motion, one of which will fall. Motion A, Planning Infrastructure Bill proposed by Councillor Spencer Gardner and seconded by Councillor Russell Simpson. Councillor Gardner and Councillor Simpson, are you happy to propose and second this? Lovely. Okay. Councillor Gardner, the floor is yours.
I'm grateful, my Lord Mayor. Members, this motion concerns the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, a matter of profound importance to our city, community and our democratic accountability. Angela Rayner's bill has the Secretary of State sweeping powers to strip planning committees of their role and force decisions onto officers alone, potentially. These proposals risk silencing elected councillors on the very developments that shape our wards. As members, we will be united in believing our city's planning decisions, the decisions that shape the neighbourhoods where our residents live, work and raise their families, must be taken as locally and transparently as possible. The proposals in this bill risk shifting power away from local councillors and communities to the centre, diminishing our ability to represent and protect the interests of those we serve. We all support an efficient, well-managed planning system that delivers the homes, infrastructure and services that our city needs. But efficiency must not come at the expense of accountability, community voices and local oversight. The government suggests that planning committees are too often refusing beneficial housing development with insufficient planning justification, leading to an unacceptable increase in costs and delays to schemes. However, national evidence shows different. Most planning applications are decided by local authority planning officers operating under delegated authority from the council in around 96% of applications in 23-24. Most applications are approved. 80% of all applications were approved in 23-24. Just 2.7% of major cases and 1% of minor cases refused by local authorities were later overturned by the planning inspector at appeal. The Local Government Association warns this bill risks eroding public trust by gagging the people's elected representatives. Councillors are often the last line of defence for residents. When a developer wants to cram yet another HMO into a quiet street, who speaks for the families already there? We do. When a developer wants to squeeze an inappropriate property onto the back garden as backland development, who opposes? We do. Take that away and you don't streamline planning, you kill democracy for local people. I therefore urge all sides in the chamber to back this motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gardner. Colleagues, are there any amendments to this motion? No. Councillor Simpson as seconder. Do you want to speak now or come in later? Oh, sorry.
I was going to come in a little bit later, but it
Lovely.
depends if
No,
anyone
that's-
wants to talk on it.
Yes, no. We have other people. So, Councillor Hunt.
Yes, I am content to support the note of the motion, and I just want to expand on something that Councillor Gardner has said. Is that he talked about councils. I mean, this government and the one before it, quite frankly, Councillor Gardner, they just pin they hang their coat on the excuse for doing this on local authorities, local planning authorities. They say that we hold up planning permissions. Well, we bloody well don't. Well, we don't. We don't. And it's annoying to hear this. I thought it was 97% went through under officers' delegated powers, but if it's 96, I accept that. Right now, up at Tipner East, we're building something like 500 new homes, you know? And the problem is that around the city is dotted, and we're to blame for this. Councillors here are to blame for this, Lord Mayor. They go on about these brownfield sites. The one in my patch, well, actually it's in Hilsey Ward, just the other side, which is the former QuickSave site, which I've written to our planning officers about frequently. And I know that the developer's been doorstepped over in Southampton and asked to get on with it, and then moved several mechanisms to make sure that we couldn't take enforcement action against him on that. But equally, there's the one down in Fratton Road, the former shoe shop, which you keep being set fire to. And it's actually quite irritating to see the Portsmouth South MP going on about Knighton Lee when he knows full well that officers are working their socks off with developers to make that particular property happen. Just in the same way that we're building out now the Debenhams site. So when you actually look around and you actually look at the evidence, the city, not just the city council, but the city is building homes. The real problem is the cost of everything. The cost of utilities has doubled. Electricity. The cost of electricity and gas to fire the bricks, which are needed in the building, has doubled. So you can't blame developers and people who regenerate stuff for having to rethink the cost of actually building. It's very difficult for them. I do wish that the government would give us those powers that we've been seeking in order to take away from people who land bank and people who hold on to properties until they rise in price to justify the purchase in the first place. I wish they would give the powers to take them off them and to develop it ourselves. But I know in a couple of the instances that I have mentioned that the value of the land was paid was too much, and the cost of restoring the land and remediating the land and then building it out would see the local government ombudsman coming down on our heads because it wouldn't be cost effective to build them out. So we're stuck. But ministers and Whitehall civil servants want to blame somebody. They always blame local government. It doesn't matter whether it's a coalition, it doesn't matter if it's Labour, it doesn't matter if it's Tory. They always seek to blame local government. But do you know who actually fixes these problems? It's not ministers up there changing the rules around planning so that we can have less say. It's local councillors that get on and fix it. It's the local planning authority that get on and fix these things. It's not our fault, for example, that we can't build another 1,000 homes over on Tipner West. That is government interference. Government not being able to make up its mind about it wants to do with Tipner West. And it doesn't enable us, therefore, to find the funding to build the sea defences, to build around Tipner West, to protect all those homes in the top of Stamshaw and Tipner and across the Hillsea. If you see the scientific evidence, it's quite scary. So it isn't us. Much of it is deregulation. Much of it is the fact that members of Parliament just don't understand how local government work. And members of Parliament want to sit around pontificating on a whole bunch of stuff, blaming everybody else, but them not getting on with their job, which they were elected to do, which is to make legislation and to make laws and regulations that actually enable these things to happen. So continually bringing power back to the centre, which is what this notice of motion is about, and passing responsibility from locally elected representatives to unelected council officers is definitely the wrong way to go about it, and is definitely going to put people's backs up. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Hugh Mason.
My Lord Mayor, the motion makes reference to the Cabinet's response to this ministry consultation on their so-called reform of planning committees. In that, and in a subsequent contact with them, with the then Minister of State, we made it clear that we did not agree with the principle of a two-tier structure for determining planning applications, where almost every application would be decided by the planning officers without the possibility of determination in a public meeting unless members were to request it and it were be approved by the planning officers. We made it clear that such an approach would inevitably erode public confidence in the planning system. And I would emphasize this. I think confidence in the planning system is very difficult to maintain because people's cherished ambitions are often destroyed by the planning regulations. But still, there is a good measure of public confidence. The reform would erode that. There is this other aspect of the proposed reform, which I think must be the concern of the Council as a whole. This is the proposal that applications in Tier A, which would be 95% of them, could only be brought to the Planning Committee if a so-called gateway test were passed, which required the agreement of both the chair of the Planning Committee and the chief planner. If you think about it, this would turn local government on its head. At present, according to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government fact sheet of September 2025, quote, in England, planning decisions by local planning authorities are the responsibility of planning committees, although they can delegate decisions to officers, end of quote. Under the government's proposals, all but the most major planning decisions, those in the 5% of Tier B, would be the responsibility of officers, although with the approval of both the chief planner and the chair of the planning committee, they could be devolved or delegated to the planning committee. Thus, in most cases, the reality would not be the council planning committee delegating to officers, but officers effectively delegating to planning committees. What would make this dreadful reform even worse is that the electorate would inevitably hold councillors responsible for outcomes over which they have no right of decision and no possibility of a realistic input. I think this is a matter on which the council as a whole should take a view. And unless you consider the government's proposals acceptable, it would be appropriate for the leaders of all groups jointly to express their concern to the Minister and to the Minister of State. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Candlish.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I think I'm going to end up echoing some of the things that have already been said, but never mind. The role of a local councillor is not always very well understood by our residents, but one thing that they do believe is that local councillors should have a role in shaping local planning decisions, and that all decisions, all important decisions, should go through some sort of a public process. To go against this is to further undermine the role of local councillors and local government, and at times that seems almost to be like the aim of the government at present. The planning reforms of the last Conservative government led to what became widely known as a Developers' Charter, a set of laws that favoured developers over residents, including a requirement for those on the planning committee to have a positive bias towards applications. And this included things like permitted development rights that enable people to put large extensions out of the back of their houses with no planning permission at all, and also the conversion of buildings into things like HMOs, again, in a way that is already largely outside the control of local councillors. And honestly, this comes as a complete surprise to most of my residents. But even this pro-development bias is not enough for the current government, because in December 24, they changed the National Planning Policy Framework to require local planning committees to not just have a clear reason, but have a strong reason, a further raising of the bar. However, up until now, councillors could at least call in any application to have it discussed in public and to try to use the local knowledge that we have as local councillors to improve or reject it. And I'm proud that I use my time on the planning committee to both vote for and against such applications, using the insights I have about the city that someone in Westminster would not have. The government is now proposing, I understand, that all developments of less than 10 properties, which has already been said, will cover the majority of the conversion of individual homes and flats into other uses, will be taken away from the oversight of local councillors, and decisions made behind closed doors by unelected council officials simply following dictates and laws made in Westminster. That's not the fault of the local officials, they're just doing their job. But it takes away the extra knowledge that we have as local councillors. In the long run, this is going to weaken the link between residents and local government, and frankly make them wonder why they need local councillors at all. So this motion is another ill-thought-through initiative by the government, and to me, it seems part of a wider attack on local government. It's a further centralisation of power, when actually the change we need is to devolve power, money and responsibility to local areas who best understand what they need and have the responsibility for those decisions made by local councillors. This isn't about being a NIMBY, it's about making the power to make decisions locally here in Portsmouth and not in Westminster. And that's the reason why I'm going to be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Smythe.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I was originally trained as a planner, and we are going to abstain from voting on this motion because it's a motion that only tells part of the story. I share, in fact, personally, some of the concerns that have been expressed about allowing councillors to represent public opinion. But one of the key things about the Planning and Infrastructure Bill is that it's leading us towards a much more clearly plan-based system. The document that we approved without any discussion earlier on is an important amendment to our local plan. And the local plan has been the subject of all sorts of consultation with the public. And since I trained as a planner in the 1970s, I have always advocated a plan-based system. In other words, a system where the public can participate in drawing up a plan for the city. And we've done that on several occasions, and the latest version is what the paper we approved earlier is amending. And really, because that is not mentioned at all, the notion that we, the citizens, should get involved in the development of a local plan, which would then signal to developers what we expect to be able to give permission for, and we would already have discussed those land use proposals and the policies that guide development, including HMOs, is already then decided by a much wider group than just the council members itself. And because this motion doesn't mention any of that, it isn't these decisions we all make isn't part of isn't done in a vacuum. It should be done in a place where we've all discussed much more widely than this chamber what the local plan looks like, what the policies are, and what are the principles we agree on. And that is the framework in which decisions can be and should be delegated to officers. So we'll be abstaining on this motion because it's not really a motion that's complete enough for us to put our name to. But I mean, we do understand the need for citizen involvement, and that should take place in energetic discussion about the local plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smythe. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was actually going to have it really brief, but it's actually going to be a little bit longer now, and I'm probably going to have a little bit of a moan, because I think Councillor Mason and Councillor Gardner put it quite eloquently exactly what this motion is about. I mean, if you feel it isn't adequate enough, you put an amendment in. That's what I always thought. You don't just abstain from it. And I'm a bit disappointed because I was hoping that everyone would support this, and I was going to actually ask the Labour councillors to actually get on the back of the Secretary of State to give us an answer back from July, when we put a motion in lawful development certificates, which was amended by Councillor Mason, and that actually had a mentioning of the Modernising Planning Committee, and we've heard nothing. So I really hope this letter makes a difference, but it doesn't look very good if we're not unified. You know, at the end of the day, we've been elected to represent the concerns of residents, and for you not to support, and for Labour not to support it, it's just a real cop-out. And I really feel for their residents that they don't feel that the councillors they are elected are going to represent them when there's planning disputes.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Swan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this, and I also swore I'd never say that, but here we are. I wholeheartedly support this motion, and I'm glad it's come before us today. I do take umbrage with the notion that this is somehow honourable. When the MP for Portsmouth North refuses to talk to residents about this move by central government and won't even acknowledge her role on the committee that's actually putting it in place. That speaks to me that they know it's damaging, they know it's deeply undemocratic, and they want to hide away from it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swan. Councillor Gardner to sum up.
In the name of localism, the government are forcing deeply unpopular local government reorganisation on the people of Portsmouth with the creation of a mega council. It is incredulous at the same time they are taking steps to give them powers to stop decisions being made locally by the people they affect. The people of Portsmouth deserve a voice. We know many residents feel their streets are being transformed without their consent or without proper local debate. We also know that planning and infrastructure are not abstract. They have real impact on parking, schools, services, community cohesion, on the availability of family housing, and on the neighbourhoods that underpin our city. The greatest asset that our city has is its people and places. Let us not hand away the safeguard of local voices in the name of speed or centralisation. I commend the motion to Council and ask all members across all parties to join me in defending the role of local government, members and our residents in shaping the future of Portsmouth. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Colleagues, there are no amendments to this, so can I see those in favour of the motion, please show. Oh, all right, depends how many people are standing, Simon. You need 8. I think you've got 8. Okay, we do a recorded vote. Young James.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So, in the usual manner, I'll ask you to stand if you wish to vote in favour, and then again stand if you wish to vote against or to abstain. So, those who wish to vote for this notice of motion, please stand. And please take your seat once I call your name. Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Holder, Councillor Dorrington, Councillor Oliver, Councillor Kadir, Councillor Fazakerley, Councillor Swan, Councillor Adair, Councillor Candlish, Councillor Brown, Councillor Barrett, Councillor Atwell, Councillor Mason, Councillor Pitt, Councillor Hunt, Councillor Sanders, Councillor Horton, Councillor Gardner, Councillor Bosher, Councillor Dyke, Councillor Cordy, Councillor Dent, Councillor Standen, Councillor Simpson and Councillor Madrick. Those who wish to vote against, please. There are none. Those who wish to abstain from voting. It's Councillor Heaney, Councillor Vallely, Councillor Fielding, Councillor Shah, Councillor Smythe, Councillor Ghosh and Councillor Adeniran. Thank you.
And as Lord Mayor, I'm also abstaining.
Lord Mayor abstaining.
Well, I'm not sure, do people want to know the numbers? It is clearly carried, as there were no votes against. What the numbers are, James, is 25 in favour, 0 against and 8 abstentions. Okay, colleagues, let's move along to motion B, fair vote proposed by Councillor Lee Hunt and seconded by Councillor Richard Adair. Councillor Hunt and Councillor Adair, are you happy to confirm your proposing and seconding? Yes. Yes. Great, wonderful. In which case I'll call Councillor Hunt to propose.
Lord Mayor, it's a strange world. We go from Labour doing something illiberal and centralising to something that is progressive and something that I hope the whole council will want. I really do. I grew up on a tough council estate, Lord Mayor, just north of Southampton. And even from a young age, I was interested in what went on around me. I read newspapers, books, magazines, I watched the news. I was also part of a gang, streetwise, but I was well informed about these things around me. And today, I believe that young people are even better informed than back then and have a right to make choices about their futures, including by voting. When I was 16, I was working and paying taxes. At 17, I was trusted to direct traffic, to attend assaults, search for missing persons, guard the scenes of crime, and go looking for criminals. But I was not allowed to vote. Today, over this Remembrance Week, we saw young people outside doing their duty as members of the UK's military setup, but they are not allowed to vote. Throughout the year, we see the services given by young people in so many voluntary ways and parts of group or as carers. But they too are not allowed to vote, not in England and Wales. Sorry, not in England. We see young people giving and debating in Portsmouth Youth Parliament, but they can't vote in elections. It's got to change. For many years, the Lib Dems have campaigned for this change. And now, thanks to this Labour government, 1.5 million potential new voters will get that opportunity. When 16 and 17-year-olds have the opportunity to vote, they have higher turnouts than 18 to 24-year-olds. And 97% of them go on to vote again. So if you vote when you're younger, you learn to vote. And that means you are more likely to vote going into the future. And this creates a better civil society. And this move to voting provides transition, a seamless transition from learning about voting to actually voting. And already 16 and 17-year-olds are trusted to vote in Scotland and Wales for Scottish and Welsh parliaments and for local councillors. And why is that right denied to English youngsters? Equalising voting across the United Kingdom draws us all together. It is right now an unjust division. So what is next for fair votes? To keep all those young people interested in voting for every good reason, then we need to move away from the first past the post to proportional representation. But the form that it takes is for another debate. Lord Mayor, those 1.5 million new young voters their votes will want to weigh the same wherever they live. A vote for a Green will help elect a Green person. A vote for reform will help to elect a reform person. Same for the Lib Dems, Labour, Conservatives and Independents too, or any group. No longer will the future of Britain be decided by minority votes and minority government. No longer shall we see the social media swamped with activists, especially, I have to say, from the Labour Party, pleading with other parties to give up their vote in favour of their person rather than the one that they really want or the thing that they really believe in. And all that nonsense will go. And for fairer votes means getting corruption out of politics. For too long, vested interests have eroded and controlled British MPs. We see it every day, even here in Portsmouth. Business, corporations, and to a certain extent some unions, and oil barons, media giants, all buying up MPs. God knows, even the Russians are doing it, and we will see a former reform person sentenced this week, in the upcoming month, for basically treason. So the Russians are coming for our elected representatives too, and they betray our country. They betray our environment. They betray the faith of so many young people who want to believe in them, in the MPs, who want to believe in Britain, who want to believe that they can grow up in a decent world free from the tyranny and these oppressive forces. That freedom flows from free and fair votes. Young people, Lord Mayor, will help us turn that page.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Hunt. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, are there any amendments that are coming forward? Councillor Madgwick.
Yes, there is an amendment for reform, Lord Mayor.
And is that seconded, Councillor Madgwick? Thank you very much, Councillor Cordy. Are you happy to have that circulated now?
Yeah,
Councillor
sure.
Madgwick, thank you. If we could, Peter, if you could take that round. While that's going around, Councillor Adair, will you want to speak now or do you want to hold your peace? Well, let's get this sent round first so that people can see what the amendment is, and then I think Councillor Madgwick gets to propose his amendment, and then I'll come to you. And I can't say Councillor Madgwick Jr. anymore. Okay. I think has everybody got something? Lovely. Councillor Madgwick, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Yeah, this is a motion where half I love and half I hate. I mean, ever in a day since being a young person where I voted for a party, actually, people would be very, very surprised that I voted for back when I was 18. But even back then, I absolutely loved the idea of proportional representation. Fully support it in every capacity, and I think it should be implemented immediately. And I find it so ironic that a lot of parties campaign on it, and then when they actually become the government, they all of a sudden don't want it anymore. It's one of those ironic things. But I do hope that our government at some point will put proportional representation in, because I do think it's fair. And I think we all know when we're knocking on doors, people think about wasted votes and stuff, and no vote should be wasted. You know, I remember speaking to somebody just recently at the Paulsgrove by-election, and they said, oh, they were going to vote Green Party, but they're not going to bother because they can't win. And I said, no, 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 go vote. You should vote. But it's such a shame that they felt that there was no point in voting because their vote was, you know, fundamentally wasted. So proportional representation, entirely support. I do have an issue with 16, 17-year-olds voting, and that's not just on behalf of Reform, that's on behalf of myself as well. It's something that I feel against, which is kind of cut your nose off to spite your face, because everybody will know here, the most recent polls show that Reform is polling second amongst 16 to 17-year-olds. Obviously, Green Party doing really well as well, and Labour colleagues. So it's not like it's a down-and-out scenario for Reform UK. My fundamental problem with this, however, though, is that I always believe that if you should be able to vote in an election, you should be able to stand in an election. So I think if the motion maybe read something, and maybe the government was suggesting allowing 16-year-olds to stand, then that would be a different conversation. But I find it very hypocritical that we allow 16-year-olds to vote in an election that they can't stand in, and that's a fundamental issue for me. So we're not comfortable supporting a motion that would support in any way 16 or 17-year-olds voting. We think it's inappropriate at this stage. But as I say, we do support proportional representation. So it's a difficult one for us. But that's why we put the motion in, the amendment in. I'm sure it will not be subsumed. I hope it will, so that we can vote on it, because we do support proportional representation. But that's all, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Medwick. Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. If we'd been in this chamber 100 years ago, it is very likely that a notice of motion may come forward to give votes to women. 100 years ago, that was seen as something absolutely outrageous. You know, what are you talking about? Women voting. Then we had the suffragette movement, and we all know that what they did, very brave women who actually fought for their cause, the cause they believed in, and they eventually got votes for women. And I'm quite sure that perhaps in 100 years' time, somebody will stand in this chamber and say, do you know what? They had a debate on this day in which they were debating 16-year-olds having the vote. And it could well be that for the last 100 years, 16-year-olds have had the vote. I think when I was young, when I was 18 and able to vote, my generation, I think 18, was a very fair age for voting. Because at that time, we did not have the bombardment of social media, all the things that 16-year-olds and younger than that have at the moment. You know, youngsters have a whole host of information given to them. Some is good, some is bad, but they have something called TikTok and WhatsApp, Instagram. We have 24-hour media. Youngsters are absolutely bombarded with information. And I think given the information they're given, I think they're more than capable of making reasoned decisions on what they're going to vote for. So I really support this. I think it's about time 16-year-olds are given the vote. As it says, they pay taxes, they can do a whole host of things, but they can't vote. And I think there's another little anomaly which goes along with this, is I've got a 94-year-old mother. She has severe dementia. I could sit her down and I could convince her that Neville Chamberlain was the Prime Minister and the Teletubbies were the Cabinet. She has no comprehension of what she would be voting for, and yet she has the vote. And yet we've got a situation where a 16-year-old who is clued up on the events of the day, knows what's going on in the world, knows what's going on in this country, knows what's going on in the Middle East, knows what's going on all over the world, is denied the right to vote. So I really do think it's about time that we did that great service to our 16-year-olds and our young people and give them the vote. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Adair. Councillor Cordy, there's nobody else to speak. Would you like to come in? Hold on a second. Oh, Councillor Heaney just leapt in, but Councillor Cordy, you seconded the proposal. Would you like to come in now? No? Oh, we've now got 97 people wanting to speak. Councillor Heaney.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm curious about the Reform Amendment, because why didn't they actually suggest that welcoming the idea of 16-year-olds being able to stand for office? It seems really weird to just knock it out. But I'm presuming it's in line with Councillor Medwick's view that young people shouldn't be paid as much as they currently are, and they shouldn't be allowed to vote either. In terms of the welcoming of 16-year-olds, I mean, I think the interesting experiment was when the Scottish referendum took place. And when they talked to young people about that, there was an important issue here that the future of Scotland was going to be their future, but they were not able to vote until they were given that opportunity. And the sorts of levels of debate and discussion that 16-year-olds engaged in was really pretty good, really. And it's just a real pity that they weren't able to vote in the Brexit election, because that is, again, a number of young people have subsequently said to me after that, you know, our futures there was decided by people and we didn't have an opportunity. So I have long been convinced that, partly because of the practical reasons that we've talked about here, about the ability to work and so on, that 16 to 17-year-olds should be able to cast a vote. And I'm very glad that the Labour government have agreed to bring that forward. In relation to proportional voting, I mean, I joined the Labour Party in 1980 and very soon after joined the Labour campaign for electoral reform, because I lived through the 1980s and saw a government winning about 40% of the vote and not winning 40% of the vote across the country, but mainly in England, and then initiating policies that were clearly to the detriment of certain parts of England and very particularly Wales and Scotland. And despite the fact that those countries continued, those nations in the UK continued to vote not for the government, they still didn't get much out of it. And I thought this was terribly unfair, because having a massive majority when you can only secure 40% of the vote didn't seem to me to be right. And that's the problem with the first past the post system. It rewards concentrations of support and does disproportionately reward parties in elections. To an extent, the Labour government in 1997 was the beneficiary of that, and of course the current Labour government has been the beneficiary of it as well, and there is quite a significant disproportion between seats gained and proportion of votes won. The problem that creates, of course, is that if you go back to 2015, when UKIP were standing, they won 4 million votes across the country, but got, I think, 1 member of parliament. The problem with that is it makes people incredibly disillusioned with the political system when you see that level of voting and they get no representation. The problem, of course, was that the UKIP support was spread incredibly thinly across the country. There were not enough concentrations of support to enable you to win under the first past the post system. So therefore, I think there is a good reason to say that when we have a multi-party system, and we do have a multi-party system, we've had a multi-party system for quite a while. You can go back to the 60s and 70s with Plaid Cymru and SNP. We now need to make sure that people's political choices are reflected in the seats that are gained. It makes governing more difficult because obviously we are not going to have automatic majority governments. But let's not forget that the first past the post system doesn't guarantee majority governments either. The coalition from 2010 to 2015, the 1970s, when the Labour government relied on the Liberals for support, you go back to the mid-1920s, and you can go back to after the First World War to the second 1910 election. The Liberals relied on other parties to support them. So the first past the post doesn't guarantee strong and stable government, as is often claimed. And as I say, the main problem we've got is the potential disillusionment with the political system. And when parties, major parties, are suffering pressures, and we are, and the Conservatives are, and so on, if that representation can't be reflected in people's choices, then I think it undermines the political system. Ironically, rather by accident than design, the current seats for the Liberal Democrats more or less reflects their vote. But this is not a cause. This is an accident, I think, in many respects. So in that sense, again, I think we need to make sure that the system does actually reflect that. So I'm very happy to support, and I think my colleagues are as well, that we do need to move to a more proportional system. I have some hope because the Labour government of 97 did bring in STV into Scottish local government. They brought in the electoral member system in the Scottish Parliament. They also did the alternative vote for the mayoral election. So we have had a multiplicity of local election systems under a Labour government. So I'm hoping that they will recognise the reasons why we now need to move to that. Because I think in the current situation, it's very difficult to predict what a general election would do. If you look at the way if parties have less than 30% of the vote, it's extremely difficult to predict the number of seats they will get in the current system. And we could get an extremely strange result. So I think it's imperative that we look at that, and I think we should support a move to a more proportional voting system.
Thank you, Councillor Heaney. Councillor Winnington.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Heaney, for some really good points. I mean, we don't even have to go back that far since we had our last minority government, which was, of course, Theresa May running on strong and stable. Well, that government she got when it lost its majority was hardly strong and stable, was it? Having to rely on the DUP for support to get her majority. And, of course, basically siphon money to pet projects to the DUP in Northern Ireland for that purpose, which was to the detriment not just of the rest of the UK, but also other areas of Northern Ireland that weren't part of the DUP's core constituency. So that by its very nature, first past the post fails because it's designed to be a majoritarian system, and when it becomes not a majoritarian system, it starts to really struggle and starts to have real issues. We found out to our detriment what happens when you're a minority coalition partner in a majoritarian system. You generally get absolutely hammered, which is what happened to us in 2015. But at the same time, the party who's the bigger party tends to, even if people aren't very happy with the government as a whole, they tend to benefit because someone has to get a kicking and then they reap the rewards, as does, of course, the main opposition, whether they've done much to earn that or not. So that's the problem with, well, one of the many problems with first past the post, but it's also, I'd say, the frustration aspect, because it is that case of you voted, you've got millions of votes around the country, and you're not getting any representation or getting very, very little, certainly not in your local area. Nothing you can say, this is my MP or this is someone who represents me locally that can do that at all. So under any method of proportional representation, you have more chance of that happening, whether it's single transferable votes or whether it's a list system or something in between. But I want to come to the votes for 16 bits, because one of the things I hear a lot about why 16-year-olds shouldn't be able to vote is because, oh, well, they're not adults. Because people say, well, you become an adult when you're 18. Well, do you? Well, in different things, you become adults at different ages. So if you're in the criminal justice system, 16-year-olds can be tried as adults. Criminal responsibility starts at 12. You can be tried, if they decide the offence is appropriate, you can be tried as an adult when you are actually younger than 16, but you can be tried as an adult at 16. So effectively, you're being tried as an adult, but you're not being treated, you don't have the privileges of an adult. For other things, of course, you're not treated as a proper adult until you're much older. Benefit system, for example, something I know very well, being an ex-DWP member of staff. You are not paid the same as everyone else until you're 22. If you're 20, between 16 and 21, your benefit is less. Indeed, I'm not sure what the situation is now, but it used to be if you were 16 or 17, your benefit was even less than if you were 18. But you're not treated as a full adult until you're 22 under the benefit system. So you're not an adult till 22. Are we saying that we shouldn't have votes until we're 22? And then what about the care system? If you're in the care system, you are supported by children's social care until you're 25. So what are we saying? That you're not an adult till you're 26? So it's all these different things. There is no one real definition of that. And of course, we do know that you can get married in certain jurisdictions in the UK when you're 16. So we've never had a consensus. The fact that lots of the things are currently 18 is besides the point. You are not an adult at any particular point. You're an adult in different areas when they say you're an adult. And I quite agree with the points that have been made about the future situation in terms of these are for people's futures. Older people tend to vote more, but the interesting thing, go back to the Scottish referendum, the turnout among 16 and 17-year-olds was actually bigger than the turnout for 18 to 24-year-olds. It was a really interesting point because they were really engaged, because for them, it was the first time they could vote, any of them, but also it was something that was really galvanising for them. They were really looking at their future. Was it right that Scotland became independent, or was it right that Scotland stayed part of the UK? But it was something that all of them were having those conversations about. So there's reasons for both of the parts of this motion, and there's a reason to reject the amendment which has been put forward by Councillors Madrick and Cordy. So I commend this motion. I'm really pleased that the Labour government is sticking to this pledge that they had before the election, and indeed have had for quite a few years now. I hope it comes very soon, And I also encourage them, people like Graham and the rest of the Labour group here, to really have that conversation within the wider Labour Party to bring forward proportional representation at all levels of government in this country. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Winton. Councillor Candlish.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. This motion calling for fair votes has three parts. Votes for 16 to 17-year-olds, restrictions on foreign donations to political parties, and the introduction of proportional representation as a means of strengthening our democracy. We've had discussion about 16 and 17-year-olds and PR. I'm going to be dull and talk briefly about the second. Much less politically sexy than the other two, but I think just as important. But first, I must say thank you to the Labour Party for addressing the issue of foreign funding in UK elections. Frankly, it's a form of interference that's just as direct as that of Russian bots in social media. People who do not live or properly contribute to taxes in our country should not be allowed to vote here, but nor should they also be able to give big sums of money to buy influence here, whether they vote or not. The motion rightly applauds the move, therefore, to restrict the ability of foreigners to use shell companies to do this. This, of course, famously was the means through which someone like Elon Musk was going to donate millions to Reform, and through which a succession of dodgy characters gave money to the Conservatives and to other parties during the last Parliament. To this day, the Treasurer of Reform is still boasting about plans to bring in millions of pounds through donations from people who choose to live for tax reasons either in offshore tax havens or in places like Dubai, or to shelter their assets there at least. It's currently legal, but so much for being patriotic and supporting your country. So although I support this motion, I don't think it goes far enough. We need to be tackling the big money in politics before we turn into something like the United States, Nigeria, or Saudi Arabia, all countries that I have lived in and where I've seen for myself how big money in politics and corruption go hand in hand. Modestly restricting donations via shell companies should just be the start. The Kelly report of 2011 called for a maximum donation by an individual or individual entity of £10,000, and that was to try to stop the mega-rich moguls or the union executives from using corporate actions to donate large sums of money to political parties. These can often run into the millions of pounds, completely overwhelming anything that the individual can do in terms of contributing to democratic discussion and debate. Limiting the scale of these donations would require all political parties to focus on having a positive agenda rather than a negative one, and engaging with volunteers and the wider public rather than concentrating their efforts on satisfying the needs of a few wealthy people to fund their campaigns. Better described as allowing those people to buy influence and access. All three elements of this motion are about achieving fair votes. Extending votes to young people who we treat as adults elsewhere, but disenfranchised when it comes to voting, as we've heard from other colleagues. My thoughts around limiting the role of big money in the political process, and proportional representation, which is all about making politicians better reflect the communities they come from. On that basis, I can do nothing else other than support this motion, but I hope that it is just a staging post onto something much bigger and a wider change to refresh our democracy for the 21st century. Change needs to be much more than a slogan. It needs to be about real action and real decisions made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Candlish. Councillor Smythe.
Councillor, I'm sorry that I'm going to be very boring about this. From what has been said around the chamber, all of which I agree with, I'm very happy that we won't need to consider this amendment. But I would like to give Councillor Cordy the chance to tell us what the amendment actually means. Because at the moment it says to remove the second requested resolution. Does he mean remove the whole of the paragraph with a little 2 in, or does he mean just removing the bit, ask the leader to write to the Secretary of State in relation to welcoming 16, 17-year-olds to vote? In which case, Councillor Cordy, what you're left with is a sentence that reads, at the next general election and the closure of foreign donors to loopholes, and furthermore urges the government to replace. It doesn't say anything at all without, and I just think it would help the chamber when they're considering whether to vote for or not the amendment, if you told us what on earth the amendment was about. If councillors read the detail, it doesn't make sense linguistically. You don't want to leave us with something to vote on, which is and at the next general election and the closure of foreign donors' loopholes. What are we doing with that? It doesn't say. Maybe you can use it as a chance to clarify. I'm surprised this got through James Harrison's vetting. It is not, as far as I can see, an amendment we could even consider if we liked it.
Councillor Smythe, my understanding is that an amendment can say what it likes. We can have an amendment that says that the moon is made of green cheese, and it would still be debated. It may not be true, but our standing orders do not have rules in terms of either grammar, accuracy or truth, and therefore people can put down what they like.
Okay, well, I'll point out then. This is the reason, absolutely, to reject it out of hand.
Thank you, Councillor Smythe. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Usually when I get up to talk psephology after Councillor Heaney's spoken, it's to be critical. On this occasion, it's to be entirely supportive. I'm a few years younger than Councillor Heaney, but my recollections of the 1980s are indeed very similar to his. It was the 1983 general election that triggered for me a lifelong interest, not in proportional representation, but in electoral reform delivered by the single transferable vote in multi-member constituencies, because it is the only decent form of proportional representation, something I have believed for pretty much all of my life now. That general election returned 23 seats for the SDP Liberal Alliance, with 25.4% of the vote. The Labour Party, in their worst electoral performance until the more recent one on the second Jeremy Corbyn election, secured 209 seats on 27.6% of the vote. 2.2% of the vote difference made a difference in seats of 186. That is not, and it never has been, an electoral system fit for purpose in the 21st century in a modern democracy. It is frankly shameful that everyone who's had the opportunity to change this has thrown that opportunity away. Under the Blair government, we had the absolute nonsense of the Jenkins Royal Commission, which went nowhere. Under the coalition, I'm going to be critical of my own party now. It should have been a red line. We should have said, we're only going to put you into government if you're going to introduce electoral reform. And Nick Clegg failed to do that, and shame on him. But it's unbelievable that we're still here in the mid-2020s arguing about a morally bankrupt electoral system in our country. In 1951, the Labour Party won more votes than any political party in this country ever. And that was before and since. And yet they went into opposition. And we had 13 years of Conservative government. It's an absolute nonsense, a complete basket case, and it absolutely needs to be sorted out. And Reform were talking about this quite a lot around the time of the election, and Mr Farage has gone a bit quiet about it now. He thinks he's doing well in the opinion polls. Well, history will tell him that that is a mistake. All parties, and indeed this introducing electoral reform, is Labour Party policy with their membership. It's the leadership that don't listen to them. But it's been the policy of my party for a very, very, very long time, and quite rightly so. And if we're going to have electoral reform, why shouldn't 16 and 17-year-olds vote in those elections? Because, as I just said to you, it was the 1983 general election that convinced me that the electoral system that we have is morally bankrupt when I was 14 years old. And I joined the Electoral Reform Society in 1986, not a subscription I anticipated at the time I would need to keep up for nearly 40 years, but hey-ho. And I was then still not able to vote in the UK election. So it is absolutely the case that if it was fine for me, I would be an absolute hypocrite to say that it is not okay for other young people aged 16 and 17. And I would also like to echo Councillor Heaney's remarks when he said that it seems that locally at least the policy of the Reform Party is that young people should get their minimum wage cut and they shouldn't be allowed to vote in elections. I hope they all remember that when the time comes that they do.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pitt. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I just wanted to come from this from a different perspective, really, as a parent of a child who's almost about to be 15 in a couple of months' time. A child who you've all probably met. He often sits at the back of the chamber. He'll be here in about 45 minutes. And that's not just for the pleasure of Heather's company and the biscuits she provides, but it is also because he is politically interested in these things. My fantastic but wonderfully weird child can often be found with the reports I get, having a look through at the public reports, because he's interested. In fact, he's so interested that he puts a number of people to shame, because he reads through those reports and he will ask me what the outcome of those reports are. And in fact, he looked through these documents at full council, and he was hoping to be here for this motion because he thought everything, because he sat here long enough to know that we will talk quite a bit. But unfortunately, he's not here for this. He'll be here in a bit. But he was particularly interested in this one because he made a point to me. Now, he was at one point looking at joining the Air Force. You know, you could be 16 to join the Air Force. Unfortunately, that idea has gone to pot because he's inherited my bad genes and my height issues, so that's not looking likely. But he made a point to me when we were talking about this motion that how is it that he and others, or others at 16, can go and fight for this country, but they can't have a say in how it's run or who they choose to represent them? How's that fair? So I just wanted to make a point that, you know, we do have some really great young adults who are the future of this country, who, you know, who we all as political parties, as political representatives, are hoping that will come on board with us at various elections in the future, whether it's local or general. And they don't have the opportunity to do so far, but they have amazing voices that need to be heard. I have been very keen, as much as I would like my child to come over to the Lib Dems, that I've made it very clear that he needs to go and speak to everybody of all political parties and make up his own mind. He's done that. He's had a nice chat with Penny Mordaunt. This is how engaged he was. When Flick was the MP for Portsmouth South, he had a chat with her. He's spoken to Stephen Morgan. He's had a chat with some of the Green Party members, and I'm trying to push him to have a chat with as many people as possible so he can make up his own mind. And I think that's really important, that when we have engaged children, we have a wonderful youth cabinet here as well who do fantastic work, who are politically engaged, and they've come to this chamber before, they've spoken to a number of us before, but they can't vote. And they are engaged and willing and want to be part of how we mould their future. Because let's be honest, it's their futures that we're talking and discussing. A lot of these things will come into place probably, hopefully, when they come to vote. So I am in support of this motion as a parent of a child who is so politically engaged, and I really hope people consider that we have some wonderful young people who we are trying to speak to, who are really impassioned by this, and we should give if they're able to go fight for this country, as an example, then they should damn well be 16. You can join the... Yeah, he's spoken. Sorry, Councillor Beauchamp. All right, they cannot fight for their country, but they can join the services, because my child already went and spoke to them. So that is, they can't fight. No, I've made that very clear. Sorry, I apologise for that. They can't fight.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we keep heckling down, please?
But they can serve, or they can join at the age of 16. So I apologise for that, but that is the case. Why can they do that but not vote? Thank you. Thank
you, Councillor Barrett. We're out of speakers. Councillor Cordy, do you want to come in?
I think it's quite clear what we put forward there, and I think it's quite clear what we put forward there. I don't think there's anything further to say on that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and Councillor Madgwick, you are also summing up.
Am I? Okay.
No,
I was going to say, I'm not summing up, I'm just clarifying what I've been asked to clarify. Thanks for raising that, Judith. It was slightly confusing to us too. I think there's a bit of a miscommunication between us and Dem Services in relation. I think we kind of said it's an off-the-cuff of, can you do us a favour and remove this, and it's been taken literally rather than... So I'm surprised it passed through as well. So just to confirm what we meant, Judith, just so you know, so that the sentence makes sense. So if you look on... Obviously, point number 2, it will read, ask the leader to write to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities, Local Government and Welcoming, stop. Then we remove the government announcement that 16 and 17-year-olds will be able to vote at the next general election and then continue. So it would read, ask the leader for the Secretary of State of Housing, Communities and Government and the local government welcoming the closure of foreign donor loopholes, and furthermore urges the government to replace first-past-the-post elections and proportional representation. So that's the clarification. Also, Lord Mayor, 39B, Whilst I was out of the room, I believe Councillor Steve Pitt said that I advocated to cut the wages of young people. I just want to clarify that I never said I wanted to cut the wages of young people. I said that the wages should be frozen for a temporary period of time because of the disproportionate allowance that was made. So in the last minimum wage increase, I think it was an 18% increase versus a 6% for older people. So what I said on that interview was I want to frozen, not cut, and that is a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hunt, to sum up.
Well, it's ever so interesting, and the truth is, guys, if you're young, reform are not on your side. That's quite obvious. I want to also talk about the amendment, and thank you for the clarification, but I remember this. I mean, when we put forward amendments, we get into trouble if we don't get it absolutely perfect, you know, word for word and so on. And when I looked at this, I thought, well, how did that get through? A bit like Councillor Madrick and so on. And of course, the other thing I want to say about it is they chided Councillor Smythe for not amending their proposition earlier on. They could have made the proposition about all the others, and because Councillor Madrick said that he wanted to see, that the reason for opposing it is they want to see 16, 17-year-olds be able to stand in elections. Well, we would have voted for that. So why didn't you amend it to say so? The truth is you just don't trust 16, 17-year-old youngsters. I am going to be very interested in seeing what our Conservative colleagues do, because they've been very silent on this so far. I hope they won't abstain. I hope that they will vote for it. But I have a feeling they just might vote with reform on this, because maybe they don't trust 16 and 17-year-olds as well. The truth is, Lord Mayor, that we need to unify our country, and equal votes are fair votes. So if 16 and 17-year-olds can vote in Scotland and in Wales, I just don't understand why an English nationalist party doesn't want 16 and 17-year-olds to be able to vote in England to decide who represents them. It doesn't make any sense to me because, well, it just doesn't make any sense. It's illogical. So on the proportional representation, the only other country in Europe that does first past the post is that dictatorship in Belarusia. A horrible dictatorship who locks up reporters, the same way Mr. Trump is currently locking up people right across America for no good reason, other than the colour of their skin, frankly. And he can sue me for $1 billion if he wants, but I've got $1 billion. But anyway, that's what's going on over there. And I really hope we don't get to that. But like I say to you, trust young people. Have faith in young people. If you have faith in young people now and you trust them and they're learning to go out to vote, Lord Mayor, they will continue to vote and they will remember who trusted them when they were young. They will have faith in us as we have faith in them. I see no reason why Reform would not want 16, 17-year-olds to vote. It is illogical. It doesn't make sense. What are they going to say in Scotland? Hey, up in Scotland there, Reform Scotland, we think 16, 17-year-olds could vote. But in England, we don't think 15, 17-year-olds can vote at all. And yet they oppose parties who want to run themselves. You know, they're against the Scottish nationalists, but the Scottish nationalists want kids to be able to vote, but the English nationalists don't. I mean, this is all just loony. It really is just loony. So far as corruption in British politics is concerned, I think Councillor Candish came in on that very well and covered it. I just want to, so I've covered the bit that they did. Yes, on reform and where they are in the polls at the moment, this time in the election cycle, last time, the Conservatives were predicted to win 400 seats. They went on to see Labour win this massive majority. So things change around. So you always need to be on top of your game. So if you're going to discriminate against 1.5 million voters and probably about 20,000 potential voters in Portsmouth, you're not doing yourself any favours. Trust them. Trust young people. I regret the amendment very much. And that's about it. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, do I presume that you're not going to subsume the amendment?
Well, they've already said that we won't, so no, we won't.
Okay. Okay, colleagues, can I see... so the amendment comes first. Can I... Well, only if you have 8 people standing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, okay, you've got 8. Okay, recorded vote, Joan James. So this is on the amendment first. Can I see? We'll call people for whether they're supporting the amendment or not.
That is correct. So, thank you, Lord Mayor. So those who wish to support the amendment, please stand. So, Councillor Madgwick, Councillor Standen, Councillor Dent, Councillor Cordy and Councillor Dyke. Those who wish to not support the amendment, please stand. So, Councillor Adeniran, Councillor Ghosh, Councillor Smythe, Councillor Shah, Councillor Coles, Councillor Vallely.
You can't have Councillor Coles, he's not here.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Fielding, I meant. Sorry, Councillor Fielding. And Councillor Heaney. Councillor Heaney. Right, Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Holder, Councillor Dorrington, Councillor Oliver, Councillor Kadir, Councillor Winnington, Councillor Fazakerley, Councillor Atwell, Councillor Barrett, Councillor Brown, Councillor Candlish, Councillor Adair, Councillor Swan, Councillor Mason, Councillor Hunt, Councillor Horton, Councillor Gardner, Councillor Pitt, Councillor Sanders and Councillor Bosher. Are there any abstentions? Lord Mayor. Thank you. Oh, and Councillor Tyndall.
Okay, so the votes were 5 in favour of the amendment, 28 against and 2 abstain. Therefore, the amendment falls. So we go back to the original motion as printed on the order paper. And we'll have to do a recorded vote again because that was requested. So, James, over to you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. For those in support of the original motion, please stand. Councillor Adeniran, Councillor Ghosh, Councillor Smythe, Councillor Shah, Councillor Fielding, Councillor Vallely, Councillor Heaney, Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Holder, Councillor Dorrington, Councillor Oliver, Councillor Kadir, Councillor Winnington, Councillor Fazakerley, Councillor Atwell, Councillor Barrett, Councillor Brown, Councillor Candlish, Councillor Adair, Councillor Mason, Councillor Hunt, Councillor Horton, Councillor Pitt and Councillor Sanders. Those who wish to vote against the original motion. So that's Councillor Madgwick, Councillor Standen, Councillor Dent, Councillor Cordy, Councillor Dyke, Councillor Bosher, Councillor Gardner and Councillor Swan. Any abstentions, please? Councillor Tyndall and Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, so that was 24 in favour, 8 against and 2 abstentions. The motion is carried. Thank you. We now move to motion C, motion in support of Health Watch, proposed by Councillor Ben Swan and seconded by Councillor Simon Bosher. Councillor Swan and Councillor Bosher, are you happy to say you'll be proposing and seconding this? Thank you, Ben. Councillor Bosher, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Swan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I don't have a great deal to say on this. I think the motion itself is clear and it articulates the issues. I do look forward to the debate on this one, certainly hearing from people with a great deal more knowledge than I on this subject. But I do think it's undemocratic and unconscionable for the government to be permitted to mark its own homework in the manner of closing this down. So it is an issue that needs to be debated.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Swan. Can I ask, are there any amendments to this? No, okay, no amendments. Councillor Bosher, do you want to speak now or do you want to come in later? Okay, thank you very much. In which case, Councillor Gardner, you were on the list and then you disappeared. Do you want, are you being a shrinking violet or do you want to say things now? Lovely, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. Briefly, Health Watch is our community's independent health and social care champion. It gives voice to patients, holds services accountable and drives genuine improvements. It's an essential service, locally embedded and highly effective. The government's key argument that we must close it is its Aquango is weak. While the government claims it is dismantling these bodies, it has simultaneously created numerous new ones, 27 in total since they have been in power. This makes the targeting of established valuable local watchdogs like Health Watch seem arbitrary and politically motivated and not in genuine pursuit of efficiency.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Swan and Councillor Bosher for bringing this notice of motion today. I want to speak from personal experience of Health Watch as somebody who asked them to make representations on my behalf for the way I was treated by a GP surgery in the city last year, who left me in a considerable amount of pain for a number of weeks, resulting in me being forced to go outside the NHS. Not something I've ever done before, but the pain was too much and I had to go and get private assistance, and subsequently ended up at an entirely new GP surgery where I'm delighted to say that my experience has been completely the opposite, and it's been amazing, and their support has definitely meant that I've been able to move past that particular health crisis and emerge the other side. But I know how beneficial it was to me to be able to explain all of that to an organisation like Health Watch, know that they take that on board, that they listen and that they feed that back and are that patient voice. So my view is that the Labour government should have been given more power to Health Watch in order to be able to intervene and advocate on behalf of patients and not the opposite. So I'm very, very pleased to support this notice of motion, and long may the organisation of Health Watch continue to advocate for patients' rights in this country.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. Councillor Winnington.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. When the NHS 10-year plan came out, as obviously with my cabinet responsibility, I took quite a strong interest in it. There were some good points, there were some not so good points. One of the not so good points, and the thing that really shocked me, was about the abolition of Health Watch, which I really couldn't understand. And I've actually got the 10-year plan in front of me here. And it says, and this is the first paragraph, this is part of the confusion here. Since their reception in 2012, Health Watch England, working with local Health Watch organisations, has gathered detailed patient feedback and used this to influence debates around local service delivery. That's what the 10-year plan says. Sounds good, doesn't it? And then it goes on to say, all this has been valuable, we need to go much further. So how are they going to go much further? They're going to incorporate Health Watch's functions into the DHSC, Department for Health and Social Care. So as Councillor Swan mentioned, mark their own homework. Doesn't make any sense. It's like literally they've come up with all this like really good stuff, but we don't actually like what they say too much. So we're going to kind of bring it in-house where we can shove it to a side. Because we know what happens when things like a beer moth like Department of Health and Social Care gets hold of something. It really just starts to get sidelines because, unfortunately, and this is not about this government's or the last government or the coalition government or any government, well, forever since the NHS has been around, what government prioritises for the NHS is waiting lists and money. That's what they prioritise. That's what it always becomes when you hear the Secretary of State in the House of Commons say we're going to cut waiting lists. We're going to address appointments. Things like this, really, really valuable stuff, doesn't get prioritised as much as they might say they want to. It just gets lost. And of course, what are health watches run by? So they're commissioned by local authorities who, by the way, were not told that this was coming. The first we knew about it, because every local authority commissions Health Watch in upper tier local authority, commissions Health Watch in their area. They are given money by the government to then commission it locally. None of us knew anything about it. LGA, Local Government Association, knew nothing about this at all. It was dropped on us as from above. And these health watches are run by charities. So sometimes they're completely locally based charities, sometimes they're charities which do health watches in general places, which is what happens in Hampshire, for example. So we have a charity which runs Portsmouth Health Watch and Hampshire Health Watch together, and they have one management, but then they do things in their localities, so Portsmouth and Hampshire separately. But they do a really good job, as Councillor Pitt has mentioned from personal experience. And I've worked with people when I was a support worker and when I've been working with people in the community who really make a difference through Health Watch. They also do really valuable research and interaction locally that is not just valuable for us as the council, but also for the NHS partners. And the other side of this is it mentions about social care function, which will be put back into councils. Now, I bet you anything that when they abolish Health Watch, which is the plan, and I hope it doesn't happen, I hope it gets amended out, but if they abolish Health Watch, I bet you anything they will take the money for Health Watch away from local authorities. They will not leave anything at all, and then we will have to absorb the functions of Health Watch for social care into our current budget. That's almost certainly going to happen. So it's not a good deal, is it? And I really go to this. What I think has happened, and this is where I give, I am giving some benefit of the doubt to the ministerial team in the DHSC. I think what's happened is that Health Watch England maybe hasn't done a great job. Maybe there's been some interaction. They've rubbed up the wrong way or they've rubbed up the wrong way with Department of Health and Social Care. Maybe previous Secretary of States, maybe previous ministers. I don't know. Maybe the feedback is that Health Watch England isn't working. But what they've decided to do, instead of addressing Health Watch England, they've decided to get rid of all Health Watch, including in the local areas. Where actually, if you talk to people, people in communities, they find Health Watch does really valuable work. And we know that, for example, GP surgeries in this city really value Health Watch coming along and doing research and speaking to their patients in their surgeries to be able to sort of sort things out and actually get a real understanding of what their needs are. So, I don't know, I still can't really put my finger on why they want to get rid of Health Watch and why they want to go into this way. As I say, I think ultimately it's a bit of control. It's about getting rid of NHS England. It's about getting rid of quangos and all that kind of thing. But it's not going to be good for this. So I really thank this motion coming forward. I'm really pleased that, and I hope we will speak as one as a council and say, actually, Health Watch should be retained. Portsmouth Health Watch does a fantastic job, and Health Watches right around the country do something extremely valuable that taking it in-house will not do. So I hope you can support this motion, and it has the full support of myself and the Liberal Democrat group.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whittington. Councillor Heaney.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. When I was first elected to this council in 1995, one of the bodies that I was appointed to was the Community Health Council. There wasn't a lot of takers. I wasn't quite sure why. I spent 2 years on the Community Health Council from 95 until 97 and came off. I won't go into the ins and outs of what happened, but shortly after that, the Labour government then got elected and they decided to abolish community health councils. Their argument at the time was that some community health councils were not working very effectively. And that was certainly true. Some were very, very good, some were middling, and some just didn't really do a lot. They attended lots of meetings, they had lots of paperwork, they had lots of discussions, but didn't achieve a great deal. But the answer to that problem was surely to try and amend it in some way. I mean, maybe they thought it wasn't possible because CHCs have been in operation for about 20 years. But they introduced a new system, and shortly after, in 2004, I lost my seat on the council and did some work for the Centre for Public Scrutiny, and I did it on health scrutiny in particular. Spent some time working with local authorities on setting up these new systems for patient and public involvement, and they didn't really work very well. Basically, what the point I'm trying to make is I would be very wary of abolishing an existing system that has been in existence for this length of time. Health watches have got really well established, and actually it's a model that has really worked, because not only does it have a board which actually comprises of local residents and local people with an interest in health who direct Health Watch, but we've got a model of professionals who actually work within the Health Watch system who deliver the work. Now, obviously, some other things were going on, and I've been having a look at a thing called the DASH review, which is a review of patient safety and access in health and care and healthcare landscape. And their report came out in July 2025. And they make a number of points. I'll just pick up a couple. They've talked, for example, about a large number of, one of their findings, a large number of organisations look at user experience or advocate on behalf of the voice of the user. Yet few boards in the NHS have an executive director for user or customer experience. Well, that's very clear. What they then propose is that they should bring Health Watch within the ICBs in some way. It's not quite clear how this is going to happen, but they want to amalgamate the patient involvement function with the integrated care boards. I can see their point about not having a director, but you can appoint a director for patient involvement, public involvement if you want to, who then liaises with the organisations that do that, because you are going to still have organisations that represent care groups who will want to have a role. You can't just abolish them. You may want to coordinate better how that works, but you aren't going to have them out of the loop. And I think the problem we've got here really is that if they do go ahead with this, the likelihood is you'll lose a lot of people with a lot of experience who've been involved in patient public involvement for a long time, because that's what happened when the CHCs were abolished. Loads of people just gave up and didn't want to be involved. I suppose the other thing to say as well is that one of the things that the government has indicated is it will require legislation. You can't just abolish Health Watch like that. It's got to require legislation. So there will have to be legislation at the time, but it's not actually doesn't actually seem to be a very high priority on the government's agenda for legislation. So we do have some time to put the case. And obviously I've followed some of the comments from other health watches. I think the government should think carefully before abolishing Health Watch. I don't think it would be a good idea, and I don't think it will improve patient and public involvement in health. So I do think they should think again on this one, and I hope they will do before we get to legislation.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Heaney. Councillor Bosch, there are no other speakers. Would you like to come in now or move just to Ben to sum up? Of course.
I was fully preparing myself for Labour to oppose this, if I'm brutally honest, protect their government, but it didn't actually quite transpire that way. So it sounds like we could have a unanimous vote on this one and no need for a recorded vote. I think, and I won't pretend to be the greatest guru on Health Watch. I think I leave that to my erstwhile colleague at the back of the chamber over here, Councillor Winnington. But it's a sort of a theme that seems to be running through the notice of motion on this that I've sort of picked up on. You talk about the planning and infrastructure motion we had earlier on. It's about government taking away control from local people and having that local decision. It's the same with this one. You could argue it's the same with motion F as well. It seems to me that there is a thread that seems to be going through from this current Labour government that we actually have, in the fact that we're going to take away everything from the people, the little people down here we might see ourselves as, and we're going to be the ones that are going to make all the decisions in central government. And I think you could even echo that to a certain degree with local government reorganisation that's being imposed on us. The list goes on and on and on. But then arguably you could also see from the way things are going with the Labour government that it's a case of do as we say, not as we actually do ourselves. I won't weather the point because I think there's going to be a unanimous vote on this, Lord Mayor, but I think there is a worrying theme that we're seeing through motions across this chamber, that it's all about the control of the Labour government taking away the rights from the people on the street, and I think that is a worrying sign for us.
Thank you, Councillor Bowsher. Councillor Swan, to sum up.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, thank you to all the councillors who have given their views. I'm grateful for that. I'm not a fan of quangos at all. However, there are vital checks and balances that are needed in certain areas, and this is definitely one of them. Standing up for Health Watch is standing up for our residents, and ultimately that's the whole point of the organisation, is to support residents. I really hope this council will support this motion and send a message for those up in the Westminster bubble to get their damn hands off our democracy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swan. So we have no amendments to this. So this is a simple vote. So can I see those in favour of the motion, please show. It looks unanimous. Just in case, are there any votes against? No, and as Lord Mayor, I'm abstaining. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let's move to motion D, digital IDs, proposed by Councillor Kimberly Barrett and seconded by Councillor Steve Pitt. Councillor Barrett, Councillor Pitt, are you happy to propose and second? Good. Okay. Councillor Barrett, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Can I also thank, first off the bat, Ms Scott for coming in to speak to us all today so eloquently to raise her concerns with digital IDs. I have always made a point that when I bring items to this chamber to be raised, discussed and debated, that they're things that have been brought to my attention on the doorstep or have come to my inbox from residents of this city, and this is one of those issues. I'm sure that every single person sat in this chamber, whether they're a councillor, an officer or a spectator, has had at least one conversation with someone regarding digital ID. It's a topic of conversation and a topic of concern for many. Many people that have contacted me are worried, upset, and some are just really outraged when they saw the topic of digital ID raising its ugly head again. Many may remember it's not the first time this has been brought up. The British public has constantly rejected ID proposals over the decades, and I am really proud that the Lib Dems did lead the charge on this against Tony Blair's government in the 2000s. And I hope that once again we will see this proposal rejected. I think it's really important to outline the concerns that residents have spoken to me and probably many of you about, and these are some of the points that they've said to me. They're worried about their right to privacy, the government having more control over their lives, public trust in how that data is used once it's gained, being in trouble if they did not get digital ID, the huge costs this will incur, and why money is being spent on this when there are other more important things that the public perceive need more funding. I think it's extremely important to say that concern has been raised not just by people across the political spectrum, but also by charities such as Amnesty UK, Age UK and Crisis, that a digital ID system could deepen digital exclusion and also affect society's most marginalised, such as older people, people living in poverty, and disabled people who often have limited access to digital devices or have a low digital literacy. And those people are the ones who have mainly been in contact with me to raise these concerns, alongside the worry that they could potentially get in serious trouble, or as Ms Scott mentioned, unable to access services if, for some reason, it is ever made mandatory and then enforced. People have the right to decide when to share their data or personal data and details, and when wanted. People have been able to apply for, paid for, passport or driving licence. That is a choice. We have all been issued national insurance numbers. They're given to us early in lives for employment reasons. And I'm sure we've all seen the chaos that occurs when there is a data leak or a hack and people's personal information has been shared without permission. And therefore, I can also understand the concerns that residents have raised with me on that issue alone. Many of you know I work for an MP, and this by far has been one of the most discussed topics that has come to him, but also I know to a number of other MPs across the political parties, across the country. I can count on one hand and still have fingers left over with the amount of people speaking to both me and my boss to say that they support this. So surely that actually shows that people are not in support of digital IDs. As Councillor Spencer mentioned when speaking to his motion earlier on today, public trust feel like it's being eroded, and this proposal goes hand in hand with what he said in his speech in the earlier motion. I truly believe that digital tools should be about giving individuals more control over their personal data, not giving the government more control over our lives. And that is why I understand and appreciate the concerns that have been raised by many residents across the city that I've spoken to. And that is why I have brought this motion before the council today. I really hope that all councillors will support this motion to stand alongside our residents who've raised these concerns, who are quite worried, quite rightly, and therefore we vote to show that show support for our residents, to show the opposition to the introduction of digital IDs. Really look forward to hearing what the debate will be today.
Thank you. Councillor Pitt, I second. Did you want to come in now or to... Okay. Colleagues, are there any amendments? No amendments. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I had plans to make a passionate speech about bureaucracy, administrative burden and the cost of implementing these proposals, about how sections of our community risk being disadvantaged, marginalised or even criminalised because they lack digital access, an issue that does disproportionately affect older people, those with special educational needs and those on lower incomes, about how introducing a compulsory digital ID is unnecessary when we already have other forms of identification, and about how such a mandate would erode civil liberties. The good news is I don't need to go into further detail on those points. They were very powerfully covered in the deputation we heard earlier. There are, however, two areas on which I would like to expand. The first, digital access. This is not a minor issue. A recent report from the Good Things Foundation shows that 1.6 million adults in the UK do not have access to a smartphone, tablet or laptop. Another recent study found that 4% of adults, around 2.1 million people, are completely offline, and 16% lack even basic digital skills. These figures are not abstract, they represent real people, many of whom are on low incomes or facing other vulnerabilities. If digital ID becomes mandatory for proving the right to work, it will create serious barriers to employment for those who most need the system to be simple and accessible. People without devices and the millions lacking digital skills will be locked out of work opportunities. Second, I feel this is looking to address a problem which doesn't actually exist. Employers are already legally required to check right-to-work documentation before hiring. I do not believe for 1 minute that changing the format of that documentation will suddenly make non-compliant employers start following the law. It's hard to see how this proposal addresses the real issue. And the real issue for me is privacy. The government has admitted that digital ID could be extended in future to cover areas like welfare, banking and tax. This is the thin end of a very dangerous wedge. Privacy is not just about hiding wrongdoing, it protects dignity, prevents wrongful suspicion and safeguards the freedom to dissent and debate. It is a cornerstone of a fair, free and open democratic society. We must resist measures that, however well-intentioned, could be misused to curtail that right. For these reasons, I will be supporting the motion opposing mandatory digital ID, and I urge members to do the same.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Bosher.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Going through the agenda, the first word I wrote down next to this was control, because I think that's what this is all about, and it probably goes back to what I said in the previous debate. This is all about Labour government wanting to control everybody's lives from every aspect of it. And it always seems to be the Labour Party that seem to want to do this, because it was Tony Blair last time round, and the Conservatives unpicked it. But I will give a couple of scenarios if I can. I mean, firstly, I'll start off, and I think it's already been mentioned, about hacking. We've had a lot of high-profile hacks this year. I think Jaguar Land Rover, I think Marks and Spencer's lost 98% of their revenue from the first quarter of what actually happened. And let's face it, when it comes to security in the government, protecting our data, and we could talk about all governments in here, the record is pretty lamentable. I mean, forget cyber security, Lord Mayor. I mean, we've even had instances where people have left dossiers on trains to take it even worse. But I will give a couple of examples that actually are personal to me. The first one is my father. He's disabled and he's just turned 90 years old, and quite frankly, he's a complete pain in the backside, so he is perfectly healthy as far as I'm concerned. But am I going to be asking my 90-year-old father to have a digital ID, Councillor Heaney? No, because it's going to be mandatory. He is perfectly happy with everything that's going on in his life at this precise moment in time, but we're going to foist something on him. The second one I will give, and everybody in this chamber, even Councillor Stanton, will know who I'm talking about, in Honorary Alderman Freeman Frank Jonas. Now, I've come out with the same story 2 or 3 times, and I think we've probably heard it all before. Frank's idea of digital is a typed letter just strapped to a pigeon, for crying out loud, and we all know what Frank was actually like. I mean, crying out loud, the man's mobile phone was made by JCB. It's not made by Apple or anybody else like that. And I do remember on one occasion, and again, I think I've mentioned this in anecdotes before, he wanted to understand how texting worked, so I sent him a text. Hi, Frank, this is a test. And about 6 weeks later, he came to me and said, could you tell me what that little envelope is in the top of my screen? And it was a text message that I'd sent him 6 weeks previous. Now, that might well be light-hearted, but we seem to have a one-size-fits-all and some big assumptions going on here in the fact that I can move from my father, who does have a smartphone in that respect, to somebody like Frank, who has a mobile phone made by JCB. How are we going to accommodate all of these people when it comes to a mandatory digital ID? And I'd be really looking forward to some of the Labour group who've been suspiciously silent for most of the debates, actually explaining to me and this chamber how this is actually going to work in practice. And perhaps they can give an assurance to this chamber at the same time that this information is never going to fall into the hands of cyber criminals, because that is probably where my biggest concern is. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bosher. I saw former Councillor Jonas at the weekend, and he informed me he has got rid of his mobile phone. And so he has no mobile phone of any sort, variety or kind, JCB or otherwise. Yes, many of us are following him in his footsteps. Okay, we now have 97 people wishing to speak, and we'll start with Councillor Hugh Mason.
I need to introduce myself to you, my Lord Mayor. I'm Katie ZB349. That was my national identity card number, the last time we had required national identities. And I remember the day when they were removed. And people said at that time, and people believed, and I still believe, that to have a required national identity register, where everybody is numbered and the government has everybody's number, is something which is you normally only find in dictatorial states, or states which have an exceedingly strong central government which interferes in every aspect of people's lives. And the point was made at that time, before most of you were born actually, that the characteristic of British democracy was that you opted in. If you wanted to travel, you got a passport which had a number. If you wanted to drive a car, you got a driving license which had a number. If you wanted later to do banking, you got a bank card which had a number. The objection was that except in wartime, there is no need for a government to have a database. The only reason to have a database is to exercise some form of control over the populace. I don't think that in this country we would stand up and shout, "We are the land of the free and the home of the brave." as another country somewhere does. But I think that one aspect of our freedom is that we are opters in, not people who are controlled by government. That was valid in 1950s. It is valid today. I hope people will support this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. Councillor Heaney.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, I'm going to speak on this for a couple of reasons. One, because there are some inaccuracies in this motion very clearly, and there's also a good deal of hysteria going on here as well. The inaccuracy is that the government has decided to require everyone in the UK to have mandated digital IDs. No, they have not. Pensioners don't have to have them. The only requirement they're looking for is for work, and I'll come on to that in a moment. So there isn't going to be that. The sort of hysteria that seems around that if the government has a database, you've got a problem. I have a national insurance number. When the department writes to me, I have my national insurance number. They know who I am. They know my number. They know my NHS number. When I get a letter from the NHS, I have my NHS number on there. So they've got my number and my details there. And I pay tax, so I have a tax number. And the tax office have my details. So there are lots of databases which the government have, which they can identify me and they can write to me and I can write to them. So the very existence of government databases is not a sign of a totalitarian state. It is the way in which it is used is the issue. Now, I wasn't a particular fan of the last Labour government's ID card proposal because I thought it was ill thought out and I thought it was problematic. But a lot of things have moved on since then. Digital ID is much more common. We are opting into digital ID, and this motion quite literally appears to suggest that we should abolish all forms of digital ID that currently exist within the government system. And there are things which people have opted into, and I don't know whether that is the intention of the motion, that we should just get rid of it. It says, the Council therefore opposes its opposition to the introduction of digital IDs, full stop. Any digital IDs are apparently going to be got rid of by this motion. So all the ones that currently exist that people have opted into would presumably go out as well. And it's interesting to look at the experience of other countries. I did do a little bit of checking to find out what's happening in other countries about digital IDs. And I was really quite surprised at how many countries are now actually involved in either developing pilot schemes or already have them. Estonia has had a digitalised scheme for 20 years. I didn't know that. The European Union is developing pilot projects across the countries to further integrate some of the digital ID systems they have. And even non-EU countries like Norway and Iceland and Ukraine are actually opting into this. Now, I must admit, I haven't heard that these countries are having massive problems with people being disadvantaged and there is so much opposition because it's causing so many problems. And I begin to wonder, well, if these countries are able to do this, they must have found a way to do it which is effective. Now, I am also of the view that it shouldn't be compulsory. I mean, as someone who is a pensioner, maybe retiring from work, I won't need digital ID. And we shouldn't make it compulsory for everything. But there is an issue around the work thing. If you apply for a job today, you need to prove you are who you are. So when I actually went to the university, I had to bring my passport, my national insurance number, obviously. I had to bring some of the documents with me to show that I was who I was and I lived where I was. When I moved from a temporary job to a permanent job, apparently my old checks weren't good enough. They had to get me to do it all again. So all of these documents, bills, passports, and so on, can be forged. We know there are NI numbers around the system which are available for people to use, so you can actually get hold of NI numbers. So I am not of the view that this is the end of the world. I mean, I think this motion is rather hysterical, quite frankly. I reserve my position on how they're going to implement this because obviously I haven't seen the detail and we certainly don't know the full detail. And I certainly would like to learn more about the experience of other countries to see how they've managed to do it and how they've done it effectively. So I don't say that I wouldn't oppose any aspects of the scheme, but I certainly don't feel that I can support this motion in the way it is worded because it is too bland, too broad, too hysterical, and effectively puts the cap on any form of digital ID. I think we do need to see what the government is proposing, and I reserve my right to question, oppose any particular proposals that come out. But I don't feel that I can support the motion as it is. I think what is going on here people saying, oh, people are against it, and people are opposed because they're worried because nobody is actually talking about it in a sensible way. We're all saying, if you want a database, you'll be under the Stasi tomorrow. I mean, it's a complete and utter nonsense. We should be talking in a more intelligent way about what could happen here. By all means, be aware of the problems, but also let's look at the experience of other countries and see how they managed to deal with this. So, as I say, I'm not happy to support the motion. I don't think my colleagues will either.
Thank you very much indeed. Could I have now Councillor Smythe?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'd like to build on what Councillor Heaney has said. As it stands, I won't be supporting this. And I'd like to, oh, by the way, I just first wanted to trade numbers with Councillor Mason. MMZ227. We all learnt them as children, those numbers. They're important for accessing NHS services, and I believe you can still use it. It's still on the record tied to my NHS number. But I want to tell you two different stories. One is my niece who got married to a Frenchman in France, and it was discovered that two of the essential documents she needed to get French citizenship were at variance. I think it was passport, and which had a different name on than her birth certificate. The nightmare of that was just unbelievable. Had to postpone weddings and all sorts of things. So having multiple documents is really very difficult for people. Another different story, my neighbour, who I'm taking care of at the moment because he's of his increasing age and infirmity, doesn't have a passport. Nobody has to have a passport. They don't have to go travelling. He doesn't have a driving licence. It's been many years since he drove. You don't have to have a driving licence. You do have to have an NHS number, which he does have, but very seldom do people wanting to know your identity ask for your NHS number. Partly, I think, because of the sensitivity of accidentally stumbling upon confidential medical information, which of course can't happen because it's all very encrypted. So I think this is too simple for me. I'm not going to sign this. I'd reserve the right to look at the details when they come. But how much easier than having to produce, as you do now, two documents when you are asked for anything to do with a bank or employment. You have to find your passport, you have to find your driver's license. Some people don't have those at all. It's a major cause of social exclusion. People who don't drive and don't ever go abroad, they don't have those documents. And I believe it's important that we have a document that everybody has. It's that it's not just those who are well off enough to participate in all aspects of life that give them lots of ID, but actually people who are perhaps new to the country, perhaps coming into new jobs for the first time, perhaps not having the national insurance number because they haven't worked before. Life is very, very difficult for those people without a unifying document with your photograph on it and with other records on. So I won't be voting for this. I think we've conflated the discussion about digitalisation, which of course is quite threatening to us all, and we must start being a country that does far more about abuse of private information than about actually just having it. I don't mind actually if people have my NHS files as long as they don't use it against me. That's the crime, is using confidential information because you got hold of it for a bad purpose. That should be an absolute crime. But just the swishing around of a lot of numbers that researchers may need, for example, in the NHS isn't a bad thing in itself. So I hope those stories will help you just to reconsider this, because the actual act of digitalisation and people having problems with that applies to all these other sources of information as well. It doesn't just apply to an ID card, which I think would make life easier and much, much clearer for people who are excluded at the moment from the passport or from the driving licence. Trying to help my neighbour when the circumstance he doesn't have any of those is nearly impossible. I can tell you from recent bitter experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smythe. I have Councillor Winnington, Sanders and Pitt. So Councillor Winnington is next.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. This motion for me and this entire concept is not a practical thing. It's a values thing. I'm a Liberal. I've been a Liberal since as long as I can remember. And this is abhorrent to me. Now, Councillor Mason mentioned about the fact that in this country it's an opt-in process. And so, quite frankly, what happens in other countries is irrelevant. This is about people in Britain and the way that people in Britain do things. The way we interact with the state, the way the state interacts with us, and the way we do things. Our forms of ID, apart from during the war, as was mentioned by Councillor Mason, are transactional. You have an identity for certain things. So you have a national insurance number, which gives you access to benefits, or you need one for benefits, and you have it for your job. But you apply for that, or you're given it. So some of us are a bit older than Councillor Barrett. We all got it, so it was 1988. We all got it at the same time. If you weren't an adult at the time, every single person, every child in the country got them all in 1988. Otherwise, you got one when you were 16, but you got informed of it at 16. So that's why my national insurance number and my sister's are sequential. But that was for purposes of child benefit, because that was the year that they digitalised all the benefits records, and you had to have that. Since then, of course, it's been at birth and everything like that. But that's for very specific reasons. It's not your identity. It isn't your identity. The government does not own your identity. Any ID card will do that. It will take your identity from being you. You all know who you are, I think, I hope. Everyone in this room knows who they are. And they know that ultimately, that's all that matters. We've already had the interference of our democracy by insisting that you go to vote, you have to have ID. Outrageous. I'm 18, I'm a British citizen, I'm over 18, I'm a British citizen, I can go and vote. I'm registered to vote, I can go and vote. Shouldn't have to prove it to anyone. So I'm afraid, like No to ID all those years ago under the Blair government, I will be on the barricades not doing this. If it's mandated, I will say no. I will go to prison before I have a digital ID. Before I give the government the ability to own my identity, because what can any government do with that? And again, our government has always been on consent, but unfortunately, we know that our government has the ability, because of course it's all done on convention, there's no written constitution, has the ability to do very, very authoritarian things with powers that are inherited from when we were an absolute monarchy. They can just do it. They could take your identity away and there's nothing you could do about it. And Councillor Heaney shakes his head. Absolute nonsense, Councillor Heaney. I'm sorry, my Lord Mayor. It can happen. It can happen. And the fact that it doesn't happen, or hasn't happened up till now, doesn't mean it can't. That is why it's fundamental for me that we should not be going down this route at all. Regardless of all those other things that you have about whether it's about transactional things, about, oh, you've got to have this, that and the other. My passport allows me to travel abroad. That's all it should be for. It becomes a transactional thing because you want to prove your age or whatever, or for other bits and pieces. But that's by the by. You apply for it. You apply for a national insurance number. If you lose yours for some reason, you can pick it up. You can always apply for another. You can be given a temporary number. With this, it wouldn't be that. It would be, that is who you are. And that is why it should be opposed. And we should not include it in our society. The last thing I'll use. So, I was a civil servant for 12 and a half years, as I mentioned earlier. And I was 84149712. But that was while I was working there. That now doesn't exist. That number does not exist anymore because I do not exist as a civil servant. It doesn't go to anyone else, it just goes on because there's so many numbers you can use within the DWP. But this is the thing. It's that ID, that's what it is. Digital identification. It's not about a passport. It's not about a driving licence. It's not about a national insurance number. It's not anything for any purpose other than the government to say, this is your identity and we approve of it. And as much as you might think it's nice, safe, we're a democracy, this government can always take things away, and the state should never be given that kind of power. So I support this motion and oppose any form of ID, of mandated digital ID or otherwise ID.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. Now, in my time as councillor, I've been asked on several occasions, why don't I join the Labour Party? Here, in this council, and in my last one. And right here is one of the reasons why not. I love the exchange of numbers earlier on. I have to say it's absolutely beautiful. But I'm not a number, I'm a free man, as someone once said. And we as Liberal Democrats, Councillor Heaney, have looked at other ID schemes, digital ID schemes. We've looked in Latvia, for instance. And it was after looking at it that we decided to oppose it. So it's not as if we've gone in blind. We've looked to where other countries have brought it in, and we've opposed it for two reasons. The first is just a philosophical one. In Britain, unlike in the rest of Europe, we have a long-standing resistance against the state. Councillor Winnington outlined he was a Liberal. The old Liberal approach is that the government does what business, charities, local government, normal human beings, the individual, everyone else can't do. And this isn't one of those. We have a long-term resistance to the state encroaching everywhere into people's lives, and will only accept the state telling anybody what to do if it is justified. Now, in this scheme, there are three particular issues which I have with this scheme. The first is around the requirement for employers to check someone's digital ID as part of rights to work checks. That can apply to everybody, I have to say. Now, that is not right. Firstly, there's enough checks that go on anyway. So why have a digital ID in order to do this? The second is the impact it will have on certain key groups. And the first is the digitally excluded. Now, there are many people who are digitally excluded who live in council homes. Many of them come to me saying, don't come into my house. But they're digitally excluded, so therefore having a digital ID simply won't work for them. What do they do if they want a job, which many of them want? Do they say, oh, no, you have to have this. You have to have a digital ID, but I don't know how to do it. I don't even have a laptop. And that's posed real issues for us in this city when it comes to schools and getting them educated, particularly during the pandemic. And this will actually exclude many of them from getting into the workplace, which I can't say will improve the economy of this city at all. The next one is that actually the consultation includes getting 13 and 14-year-olds to be included in the digital ID. I note that we're not giving 13 and 14-year-olds the vote, but we are telling them that they may well have to have a digital ID as part of their work. That is simply an infringement too far. Adults may be able to have a full understanding of what they're letting themselves into, but kids, I mean, under Reform, they're not going to get any more money. And under Labour, they're going to have to show a digital ID. And this is all done on the basis of they've got it already. Well, yes, they've got it already because they want to have it already. They haven't been told by the state they need to have it already. And in a country where there is resistance against the state, well, that isn't going to help. So this scheme, I have to say, I want to thank all the residents of Baffins who've come to me and asked for my opinion about this. This is a slightly longer version of what I've said. I believe that we do have certain British freedoms, and this is one of them. The right to walk the King's Highway is one of them. The right not to have an ID is one of them. I believe this scheme goes against that. I respect the opinion of my Labour colleagues, just as I did respect the opinion of my Labour colleagues in 1997 when Tony Blair tried this. It's just a difference of opinion. It's one of the reasons why I can never join the Labour Party and one of the reasons why I'll vote for this motion. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Pitt, you turned off your thing. Okay. In which case, Councillor Barrett to sum up.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor, and thank you, colleagues, for the debate today. First of all, I do want to address something. In fact, I've had a message from a resident who's watching, so people, they do watch, who's taken... So, Councillor Heaney, I think the fact that you've used the word hysteric or hysteria in that sort of form I've brought this motion forward from the concerns that residents have raised to me and probably to a number of you all. So I think that's the wrong kind of language to use to suggest that residents' concerns or this in general is hysterical. This government, this Labour government, who didn't put this in their manifesto, I believe, in the general election, this government have suggested this scheme. Therefore, perhaps if you think this is hysterical or people's concerns need to be addressed, perhaps we need to go back to our MPs, or you could go back to our MPs and take this back to government and suggest that they start having these conversations and making sure people are educated and understand these in much better format, because people are rightly concerned. They're not hysterical. They are upset. They are concerned. They're raising their concerns, and we need to address this. And it's my job as an elected representative on this council to bring forward their concerns and bring it to this council for us all to have this conversation and try and act on it. That is my job as a councillor. So I really hope that, I know you've made it very clear that you won't be supporting this motion, which is a real shame, because so many residents have come to me about it, I'm sure to all of you about it as well, and to just almost poo-poo it is, I don't think that's good enough. Digital ID, I think, does risk eroding long-held civil liberties, and I think it's something that is something that we should be concerned about. We don't know what the benefits are from this, because no one's told us the benefits from this. We don't know what the costs are to this. There's no set answer. I believe that the Culture Secretary recently refused to offer any figure on how much this will cost the taxpayer, when we know it probably will be millions, billions of pounds. And the idea that the government is pushing forward with this plan, when we know the financial situation the UK is currently in and it's under such pressure, I find quite worrying. So, colleagues, I thank you once again for the debate today. I hope you choose to support this motion, and thank you to the residents who contacted me and helped me put this together, and to colleagues as well. I really appreciate the debate today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Heaney, you have spoken, but you have indicated you wish to speak again.
B, Lord Mayor.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Standing Order 39B. I was criticised for describing the motion as hysterical. I didn't describe the people as hysterical. I described the motion. I was referring to the wording of the motion. The motion says everyone is required to have a mandated digital ID. That is not true. It says residents will be turned into criminals because they've not got a... That is not true. That is why I described the wording as hysterical. I wasn't referring to the individuals. People can have their own views, and I don't like being misrepresented that way.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, colleagues, that concludes this debate. There are no amendments to this, so can I see those in favour of the motion, please show. And those against, please show. And those abstaining, please show. Okay, that motion is clearly carried. Thank you very much indeed. Motion E, as explained earlier, this notice of motion will not be considered today, but instead be included on the agenda of the December full council meeting. Okay, we're moving on to motion F, fair and transparent allocation of assigned dispersal protecting Portsmouth housing and public services, proposed by Councillor Joe Stannard and seconded by Councillor George Madgwick. Councillor Stannard and Madgwick, are you happy to confirm that you're proposing and seconding? Sorry? You've only been here 2.5 hours. Do you need a oh, no. Do people need a cigarette break? Okay, I think the feeling is I think people want to just keep going, if that's all right, colleagues. Let's just keep going. So Councillor Stannard and Madgwick, are you happy to... Judy and Councillor Smythe?
I think it's insulting to suggest we all need a cigarette, but I think another sort of break would be very useful at this time.
Okay, there is the ability for people to leave the chamber during the meeting if they do feel the need for any other sorts of break. But okay, if people need a 5-minute break, we'll be back in 5. Okay. So we'll be back here at 4:30. Okay, colleagues. Councillor Strudwick, welcome. Lovely to see you. Have you any interests that you need to declare? Thank you. Okay, motion F, fair and transparent allocation, etc., as I just said before we were so rudely interrupted. It's an awfully long title, George. So, Councillor Stan and Councillor Madgwick, are you happy to propose and second? Lovely. Councillor Standen, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to the residents of Paulsgrove and Portsmouth in the Chamber in my very first council meeting, which I believe is a first as well, which is great. First of all, I would like to offer my condolences to the family of Alderman Jim Peaty on their loss. I never had the pleasure of meeting Jim myself. However, everything I've heard about him from the residents of Paulsgrove has been fantastic. And obviously the residents of Fratton that he served for such a long time as well. So I hope that I can have half the good impact that he had on the area of Paulsgrove and the city as a whole. So over the summer, it was revealed that Portsmouth was at the heart of a national news story that revealed HMOs were being used by Home Office contractors for asylum seekers without the knowledge of this council. Recent figures show that around 700 asylum seekers are living in Portsmouth, with some at the Royal Beach Hotel and others spread around in 55 HMOs, which staggeringly is more than the entire rest of the Hampshire Authority combined in our one city. So for anyone to say that this is not a major factor towards housing issues in our city is wholly wrong. The fact that our city is already the most densely populated in the country outside the capital, this is grossly disproportionate. The Labour government has also recently announced a plan to move asylum seekers out of hotels. This is causing great concern amongst residents, and they are worried that they will be placed directly within the tight-knit communities such as Paulsgrove or Portsmouth as a whole. I do, however, welcome the government's announcement on the 3rd of October that no new homes in the city will be used for asylum dispersal accommodation. However, we were given the same assurances back in 2023 and from the government at that time. And if we're going on Labour's current reneging on what they say they're going to do, then I don't think we can trust it this time either. Therefore, I urge you all to support this motion through to ensure that Portsmouth does not take the lion's share of asylum seekers in Hampshire, and that they are evenly distributed around the county, and ensuring we don't lose more family homes within the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Standen. Thank you. Are there any amendments to this motion? Nope, no amendments. Councillor Madgwick, do you wish to speak now as seconder, or do you want to reserve your right to speak? Could you speak into a microphone so the people of this great city can hear your words of wisdom?
Reserve.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Britain has a long history of taking asylum seekers. Whether it's the Huguenots in the 17th century, Jews facing persecution across the centuries, or de Gaulle in World War II, this country has been a haven for those fleeing persecution. That's why the failures of the current asylum system make people angry. Hotels that don't work for asylum seekers or local communities, people trafficking others in small boats, exploiting the fact that the deal that took us out of the EU allows the French to do nothing to stop them. As Councillor Standen, and I congratulate him on his election, recently said, councils not knowing where any of these HMOs are, which is what happened here. Successive governments have failed to get a grip on this, and therefore in a city struggling for space for new homes like Portsmouth, that makes people feel asylum seekers are the problem. Is that true? Well, this motion has, I have to say, some factual errors that make us doubt that. For instance, it says that Section 22 doesn't say of the Housing Act, but the context means it is of the Housing Act, is used for evictions. Yet that section is one leaseholders actually use to inspect service charges. No one comes to me wanting a home saying they've been evicted under Section 22 of the Housing Act. They do come under Section 21. The number of HMOs, Councillor Standen mentioned a figure. That's not correct. It's actually 53, not 55. But this motion also calls for things that already exist. Again, as Stanston has outlined, it wants a temporary cap on putting asylum seekers in HMOs in our city. That exists. And I understand that this will be in place until other areas catch up. And based on the discussions I have more faith in the ability of that being delivered than Councillor Standen outlined. The motion wants no more asylum accommodation without me and the housing director being notified. That now exists because this council has for years made strong representations to make sure it is so. They want the Royal Beach close to asylum seekers. They know this will happen. After all, their councillors, Dent and North, sat on the planning committee that backed plans to turn the Royal Beach into flats. Indeed, I understand the conversion will commence by next summer, so asylum seekers will leave before then. They want a public dashboard. Well, the 700 figure they use actually comes from such a dashboard. While all HMOs used by Clear Springs are on the council's HMO database. Much better than a redacted address register, which I think can only work if there are no addresses on it. And I look forward to a discussion on that later and clarity on that later. They want us to urge the Home Office to phase out hotel use in urban areas for secure accommodation. Now, Labour colleagues, tell me I'm wrong, but I think that's your government's policy. Then there are the bits where I have to say they just act like, I have to say, the politicians they say they despise. Let's take that 53 figure. Reform does not say in the motion that that is out of 3,318 HMOs in the city, or just under 1.6%. The 700 figure is also 0.3% of our city's population. Now again, some people will say that's a lot of people. But it pales to the near 13,000 people who came here from other parts of the UK last year, or the 29,000 students this city has. That's the legal migration reform in the motion says is good. They're not the problem, it seems. It's the 700 that are the problem. Regarding landlords kicking people out to accommodate asylum seekers, that may be true. Elsewhere in the country, the article in the motion refers to a British thing, doesn't mention Portsmouth once. And I'm told this council doesn't know any such cases here. Indeed, as the eloquent deputation earlier said, it's landlords rejecting people with benefits that's actually more of a burden on people getting social homes. Now, regardless of this, the motion is right. Councillor Standen is correct. We do have a disproportionate number of asylum seekers. That's a point the council, including me, have been telling the Home Office for years. In 2018, you, Lord Mayor, raised concerns about the number of children seeking asylum coming to Portsmouth. In 2022, the council said the city was at capacity when there was an inquiry about using a student hall. The following year, the Home Office did not take a site in this city forwards after we repeated that and told them no. It's why, when this government asked if we wanted extra asylum accommodation earlier this year, this council said no. Government made it clear then that they got the message, and I'm delighted it's finally made that explicit and put the cap I outlined on. This motion is right to say we're a diverse city and proud of it. That's why in March last year, this council, including councillors now in Reform, backed the concept of a council sanctuary. Indeed, no one spoke or voted against it. Watch the webcast if you think I'm wrong. It only lasts 10 minutes. That's not to say that those who abuse the system should be let off. In my view, any asylum seeker convicted of a criminal offence should be deported immediately. Those who traffic people in small boats should be punished too. They exploit the fact that there's no safe and legal routes for asylum in this country. They make money out of people's hopes, and damn the consequences. Using hotels as asylum accommodation is also wrong. It doesn't work for the asylum seeker. It doesn't work for the local community. You have the situation where I think it was the Bibby Stockwell barge in Dorset, whereby people who opposed asylum seekers and people who supported asylum seekers both actually turned around to the local media and said, well, we don't want this barge here. So there is, but however
So
there
could
are.
you
I'm on my last paragraph, my Lord Mayor. However, there are so many inaccuracies in this motion, or saying things that we're doing already, that amending it to reflect the truth negates it, and under our rules, Lord Mayor, we can't do that. So we're going to vote against this motion on the grounds that it's either factually wrong or it's happened already. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Madgwick.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I mean, firstly, Darren, you said about figures before I go on to what I was going to say. It's actually Amanda Martin MP that said there was 58 in the city, as you'll know, and then you'll know the Home Office told us it was 55, and now you're saying 53, so who knows? Who knows? And in relation to the tenants that have been evicted in this city under a Section 21, you're quite right saying, there has been an example of this, and this was proven via the Sunday Times article where they did an investigative journalist piece. And I'll go on to that in a minute. And I want to kind of raise why or how this come to light, because I don't know if any other councillors dealt with this kind of thing over the summer, but I was increasingly contacted by people saying that they believed that asylum seekers were living next door to them or in close proximity to them. And obviously, like any councillor, I went to the Director of Housing and asked the question, and he assured me no, there is absolutely none being in dispersal accommodation, be that HMOs or family homes, that he is aware of, that he's been notified of. So obviously you take people on their words, and obviously we were going back to residents, Councillor Russell Simpson as well, and saying, you know, no, that these don't exist. And it almost made them feel like they were going crazy, and they kept going back to us, well, we definitely know they're here. And I said, no, it must be something else. It's got to be, it's not that, because we've been told it's not. And then it come on to the mid of the summer, where a estate agent, in fact, contacted me directly, which is what the Sunday Times piece was on. And they provided a copy of a tenancy agreement from a property that they previously sold a year prior, which was an HMO. And during that year, the new landlord evicted the tenants and took a government contract and resold the property through this particular estate agent. And she revealed this tenancy agreement to us, to the Sunday Times, etc., so that the article could be broadcast. And that was actually a good thing, because that made me be able to go back to the council and say, this is the proof and evidence we got, it's from the horse's mouth. At which point, the council, and with all due respect to officers, were absolutely shocked and disgusted by it, and they contacted the Home Office and said, we've been provided this, you need to give us an update, at which point the Home Office then responded. So at no point here do I blame Liberal Democrats or officers in any capacity, because you had no knowledge of it as an administration in any capacity. You weren't trying to cover up or hide anything. Neither were the officers of this council. We were completely and utterly misled by the Home Office. And that's not just the Labour Home Office, this is also the Conservative one, because Penny Mordaunt herself in the Sunday Times article said that she was given reassurances by Suella Braverman when she was Home Secretary that they weren't coming here. So Penny Mordaunt even said that her own party gave her the assurances, they didn't happen. So we didn't have an update since 2023. The reason that HMOs or family homes used for dispersal accommodation is an issue is literally due to housing crisis. We've got a housing crisis, and Darren's quite right, noting the fact of the kind of small number in proportion. However, it does push up house prices. I know from first-hand experience that you can make a lot more money as a landlord renting to Clear Springs or to Serco. Guaranteed more money, a hell of a lot more money, with guaranteed rents for 5 years, 3 months rents in advance, full fixtures, fittings, maintenance, etc. So there's an incentive for landlords to not rent to us as a council, as a social body, or to private renters, because they get more money. This then closes the market to people that can't afford it, and it's actually affecting the most vulnerable people of our society. I absolutely, as you can imagine, welcome the Labour government's announcement to start putting asylum seekers into military housing, into the, facilities that are secured. I think Labour have absolutely done the right thing there to protect people locally until that they've been processed properly. So well done, Labour, on that. However, as I say, locally we've hit our peak. And I'm glad that the Home Office have now been transparent and told us the figures. The figures are astonishing. I did actually send this motion to Alex Norris MP, who, funnily enough, good timing, responded back to me this morning, who's the Minister for Border Security and Asylum. And he's wrote back to me very nicely, actually, to assure that he has informed Clear Springs that they are not allowed to do any more additional rentals in this city through a contract. So that's really good of the Labour government to do that and to give us those assurances. But as I say, we've been given these assurances before full council. We have been given these assurances before from the Conservatives, and they reneged on those. So this motion is strengthening in that sending a clear message that we've taken our share. And this motion isn't actually about a debate of whether we believe individually whether there should be more, whether there should be less, whether they should come here, whether they should not come here. This motion actually doesn't talk about that. You can have your own private opinions about that. That's absolutely fine. This is actually just purely about the clarity in housing in our city, the openness and transparency, and to say that we've taken our fair share, because I think we can all agree, regardless of your personal opinions on this, that we have had our fair share, and other neighbouring authorities need to start doing their part. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Madrick. Councillor Standen, to sum up.
I'll take on board what you said about the section 22 and 21. Apologies for that. And if the official is 53, then fair enough. Yeah, no, that's all right. But there's like Councillor Madrick said, we've heard 3 different amounts: one from an MP, one from the Home Office, and now one from the council. So, yeah, there we go. But no, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Standen. There are no amendments to this, so therefore we go to a straight vote. Can I see those in favour of this motion, please show. Those against, please show. Thank you. And those abstaining, please show. Okay, that motion is lost. Thank you very much indeed. We now move to motion G, support for the Valor Network and urgent restoration and reuse of military housing in Portsmouth, proposed by Councillor George Fielding and seconded by Councillor Yinka Aderian. Councillor Fielding, Councillor Aderian, are you happy to propose and second this?
Happy to propose.
Thank you.
Happy to second.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Fielding, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise today to propose the motion on behalf of the Labour Group. This motion gives us a real opportunity, not just to honour courage in words, but to back it with real practical action that benefits veterans and strengthens our community here in Portsmouth. In recognising our city's heritage and responsibility, Portsmouth has always been a city of service. Our identity is inseparable from the Royal Navy, from public service, and from the acts of bravery that define our history. The people who have served this country and their families are not just statistics, they are our neighbours, our colleagues and our friends. As a council, we have a duty to make sure that their service is matched by our support, that we do more than just say thank you, and instead create structures that deliver lasting help and recognition. And I firmly believe there is a real opportunity for Portsmouth in what is being offered. Just yesterday, the UK government launched its Veteran Strategy, a transformational plan that includes the rollout of veteran support centres across the country through the Valor programme. This is backed by £50 million worth in national funding, with an additional £12 million ring-fenced for veteran housing and homelessness protection. Applications are now open for local authorities and organisations to bid for the first wave of these support centres, with the first network expected to open in spring 2026. This is precisely the kind of opportunity the motion before us anticipates. By passing this motion today, we put Portsmouth in the strongest possible position to bid for that funding, to become a regional Valor support centre, and to ensure that our veterans and their families benefit directly from this new strategy. And why should Portsmouth lead? We are uniquely placed to take our leadership role in this programme. We are home to one of the largest armed forces communities in the country. We have available former service family housing stock which could be refurbished and repurposed under the Valor scheme. We have a strong network of local partners, from veteran charities and housing associations to the NHS and community groups, ready to deliver joined-up support. One particularly powerful opportunity lies in the acquisition and refurbishment of former military housing in Portsmouth. For too long, some of these homes, once occupied by service families, have stood empty and fallen below decent standards. By working with government and partners through the Valor framework, we can bring these properties back into use, provide high-quality, affordable homes for veterans and their families. This approach not only honours their service, but also strengthens our city's housing stock, addressing need, regenerating communities, and ensuring that service never leads to homelessness or hardship. This motion gives us a framework to bring all that together. From a Labour perspective, we are turning words into action. This motion embodies our core values: solidarity, fairness and public service. Supporting those who have served is not a partisan issue, it's a matter of justice. We know that too many veterans face challenges with housing, mental health and employment when they return to civilian life. Passing this motion and following through means saying that Portsmouth will not allow service to end in struggle. It means using the new Valor framework to secure government funding for a local veterans hub, refurbishing and bringing into use under-occupied or neglected service housing, and working with partners to improve employment and health outcomes for veterans and their families. This is practical, progressive action, not just sentiment. In terms of accountability, the motion rightly calls for a progress report by July 2026, which aligns perfectly with the government's Valor rollout timeline. As Labour councillors, we will press for clear milestones and accountability so that by next summer we can show concrete progress, not just good intentions. We must set up a cross-party working group to prepare Portsmouth's Valor bid so that our city does not miss this national window of opportunity. So, in conclusion, Lord Mayor, colleagues, Portsmouth's history is defined by courage, by valour and by service. The question before us is now whether we will match that history with leadership. By passing this motion, we commit our city to lead nationally in veteran support. We open the door to millions in funding that can transform housing, services and support for those who have given so much. As a Labour councillor, I am proud to propose this motion. I urge every member of this chamber, whatever your party, to do the same. Let us honour the spirit of valour, not only in words, but in our deeds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fielding. Are there any amendments to this proposal? Can we circulate that, please? Are you, Councillor Pitt, I understand you have an amendment. Are you happy for it to be circulated?
Yes, happy for an amendment to be circulated in my name, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So, Peter, if we could give the pieces of paper out. Oh, sorry, Councillor Sanders, are you seconding? Yes. Thank you. Councillor Pitt, in the copy that I have, there is a set of initials that I do not recognise, so it would be helpful to know what a VCSE is. I may be the only person in the room who doesn't know what it is, but I would... Okay, I think that's everybody's got a copy now. Councillor Pitt, your amendment.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'm sure as everyone else in the chamber knows, it's a reference to the voluntary and community sector. I wish that it wasn't necessary to put an amendment in for this notice of motion, and everything that Councillor Fielding said sounds absolutely amazing, and it probably is. But we don't know yet whether it is, because this notice of motion was submitted before the government published the details of this project yesterday. So obviously it's understandable that Labour colleagues may have had an inside track from the members of Parliament, I understand that, but the documents were published yesterday. So there was a lot of talk about leading nationally. We do lead nationally. This council is at the forefront of advocating for veterans across this country. And if anybody thinks that it isn't, I really seriously encourage you to appraise yourself of the reasons why it is. We are gold for the Armed Forces Covenant, and we take our responsibilities to veterans very seriously, and Councillor Sanders will, I'm sure, during the debate, appraise you of some more detail behind that. But I want to concentrate specifically on the reason we've had to put the amendment in. There was a lot of talk, and there's a huge amount of talk in this notice of motion about Portsmouth, but we are in a covenant partnership with the unitary councils of the Isle of Wight and Southampton and the other districts and boroughs across the Solent, as well as the voluntary community sector, not least Veterans Outreach Support, and they're based down at the Royal Maritime Club in Queen Street, which I visited only a couple of weeks ago. For us to act unilaterally without consulting our partners when we have the most successful partnership in supporting veterans in the United Kingdom would be madness. So it is absolutely essential that we create some time to go out and talk to Southampton, the Isle of Wight, and most importantly, Veteran Outreach Support and Ian Millen and the amazing work that team do, so that we can make sure that this is the right thing. Now, in all likelihood, it will be, but we cannot act unilaterally when we are part of a really important partnership. And why does partnership matter? Because although we have a huge number of veterans in the city, so does Gosport, in fact, more per head of population than Portsmouth does. So it's really important that we're supporting people and that we're making sure that people are able to access the kind of support that works best for them, and that is not all located in the city of Portsmouth. We work with our partners to make sure that people are signposted to where they can get the best outcomes. I attend an annual event, as I'm sure you did when you were leader, Lord Mayor, with the Lord Lieutenant, where all of the progress on these projects is discussed. And I know that our most recent addition to the council is also works for Royal Naval and the Royal Marines Charity, and they are another of our valued partners in this mission. So the reason for the amendment is to make sure that we respect that partnership and that we create some space and time for us to be able to talk to our partners properly. In all likelihood, this will be fine. I'm delighted, actually, that it's moved from where the government position was prior to the publication of the papers yesterday, which was very much a top-down, send somebody to run it for us approach, which is why we did not agree to be a pilot area when it was first launched. And there was an awful lot of reservations, not just from us, but from Southampton and the Isle of Wight and the districts and boroughs and all our partners who wrote to the government offering ongoing support, collaboration, wanting to develop a better outcome and saying what proposals how we thought the proposals would be shaped. The Minister didn't write back to us, but we are pleased that now the papers have been published, many of the things that we had been concerned about have been addressed. So this is just about process and respecting our partners, and I think that's what the amendment does. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pitt. Councillor Standen.
Yeah, I think now I've done my maiden speech and my head's a bit clearer, I think I'd probably need to have a declaration of interest here, because I do work for a military charity that is involved with this.
Peter, would you like to advise? Peter Belfast, solicitor, will give us advice.
I'll take a view that's probably personal, I suppose, to personal prejudicial, in the sense that you're not asking for a definitive thing relevant to making a benefit to you or a member of your family, just a general view.
So Peter, Mr. Bell, does that mean that Councillor Standen can stay and vote or not?
Yeah, he can stay and vote.
Stay and vote. So you're okay, Joe?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Swan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this one. There it is again. I do support this motion. I think it's eminently sensible. I'm pleased to hear the words courage and valour when it comes to the service of our veterans. But be aware, when your party starts hounding veterans for supposed crimes, we're going to be throwing those words back at you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swan. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Again, I'm happy to support the amendment, and I think on this Armistice Day, the Lib Dem administration welcomes the spirit behind this motion. MOD housing has been a disgrace for years. Let me give you one example. As many here know, we've been housing Afghans who fought alongside our brave soldiers against the Taliban in that nation for years. Yet there was a delay in actually getting the number of homes, all Afghans into homes. Why? Because the windows in some of the MOD homes that we were using hadn't been fixed. It required a meeting between our council, the Home Office and the MOD to put windows in. If you wanted proof of the problem outlined in the motion, there it is. As the leader has said, when we're allowed to do things, we do it better than the rest of the country, and that's why it precludes this sort of madness. Now, we have a long history of tackling the issues that this motion raises. For instance, 2 years ago, at my insistence, after a request from Freeman Jonas, council officers told the MOD it would support managing service accommodation in this city, including, actually, Councillor Fielding, models like housing associations or local authority partnerships. The MOD said no. It wanted national and regional contracts. It has since told us improvements are underway and contractors should be given the chance to demonstrate delivery. It also said there's very little long-term surplus SFA in our area and its policy constrains their use for non-MOD purposes. Now, we disagree with that, but that's what they've told us. And indeed, despite my pleadings with them, they want to take back the dwellings currently housing our Afghan helpers. I ask our Labour colleagues and our MPs to help us reverse that. Now, as the leader has outlined, we're always open to conversations, but unless the MOD reverses its stance, council acquisition of management of SFA at the moment isn't feasible. This leads us to Valor. As the leader and Councillor Fielding have outlined, Councillor Fielding and the Labour group wants the city to take a lead. As the leader has outlined, we are. This administration firstly welcomes any improvement in help for veterans and those in our armed forces, and we welcome the veteran strategy. But we are concerned that people not in this room have been making statements without knowing the history. Valor isn't new to Portsmouth. It's something this council has been speaking with the MOD about since the start of the year. Indeed, the leader is right about the situation now, but it wasn't always the case. This council, in fact, did a deal with the Valor team last March on us being a pilot, utilising the sort of locally led co-production network that is the hallmark of the work we do here. So you can imagine the council's surprise when the following month things changed and a centralised one-size-fits-all approach was suddenly the only game in town. No reason given, and frankly a lot of hard work down the drain. In June, the team spoke to the Veterans Minister to discuss what had gone on and our approach here. We're still awaiting a reply. We're looking forward to that discussion. And there are other issues with Valor as it stands now that we are concerned with. So we're concerned there's been no substantive progress from the Greater Manchester Trailblazer pilot. By the way, in March, we were going to be that pilot. And the Office for Veterans Affairs confirmation last month that progress had been delayed due to a freeze on civil service recruitment. For those who've got the Chancellor on speed dial, can I suggest you make use of it? Despite all this, as the leader has said, we welcome the statement yesterday as it looks as if it's getting back to the sort of approach that was on offer in the deal we struck with them in March. Addressing homelessness, as Councillor Fielding has outlined, is finally in there. Hallelujah. Clusters of authorities can bid, something the motion says we shouldn't do, by the way. So that's why it's important to have this amendment. But it can only be done, as the leader has said, through the partnership that we have, as identified in the Solent Armed Forces Covenant Needs Assessment. As the leader has said, it's nationally recognised as best practice, and it means we can deliver things like priority access to social housing, with armed forces applicants not disadvantaged by lack of local connection, and tailored support and access to services designed to help the transition to Civvy Street. Indeed, I beefed that up only last week. Close working with providers of veteran-specific accommodation like Hague Housing, Stoll, Seska and Alabare, as well as referral to the National Op Fortitude Scheme. We want Valor to continue that. We know other councils seem to be rolling back on the commitment to our armed forces. Hampshire has got rid of its armed forces covenant officer, for instance. Madness, my friends, madness. And oh, by the way, under reorganisation. I would say, though, that on housing it is good that the Labour government has recognised across the country something Lib Dems in Portsmouth saw years ago. Many of the homes our veterans and our armed forces, our brave soldiers live in are a disgrace to our heroes. I would say, though, that the best thing it can do to best boost veteran housing in this city is the same as 2 years ago and let the council run it. But it's the MOD, not the council, that says no. This administration has always put Portsmouth before party. And when it comes to helping our armed forces, as Councillor Fielding outlined earlier, we all should. Especially after the changes to the Valour scheme that take it back to the agreement that we had with it in March, that's now possible. But we're successful because we work with people. We don't, as Councillor Bosher has outlined in a set of motions across this meeting, do things to people. That's why we want you to support our amendment, and we can work together with your government to make sure that we do have homes fit for heroes. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanders. Councillor Adarand, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'm very pleased to second this important motion, which speaks directly to Portsmouth's proud heritage as a city of service and sacrifice. For generations, our city has stood as a home for the Royal Navy, the armed forces, and for thousands of veterans and their families. That legacy carries with it a responsibility, a duty to ensure that those who have served our country are treated with the respect and care they deserve. It is deeply concerning to see the state of some former service family accommodation in Portsmouth. Homes that once housed service families, homes that should symbolize pride and stability, have instead fallen into disrepair, left empty and unfit for habitation. This is just a housing issue. It is a matter of dignity and respect for those who have worn the uniform and given so much. The establishment of the Fallow Network provides us with a real opportunity to change that. It gives Portsmouth the chance to work in partnership with the Ministry of Defence, the Office for Veterans Affairs, and local charities to bring these properties back into safe and decent use. It allows us to align local action with national strategy, ensuring that veterans and their families can access not just housing, but the full wraparound support they need to rebuild their lives after service. By restoring and reusing these homes, we can address local housing pressures. We're keeping faith with our armed forces community. Portsmouth should be at the heart of this work, not only because of our history, but because we have the expertise, the partnership, and the moral commitment to lead by example. This motion is, at its heart, about honoring service through action. It is about ensuring that when we say thank you to our veterans, those words are matched by meaningful support and decent homes. I therefore commend this motion to the Council and urge members to give it their full support. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Fielding, to sum up.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for everyone contributing to the debate. In terms of the amendment, of course, it was always our intention to make sure that we're doing things in partnership with all our partners under the Armed Forces Covenant and with all charities that support veterans. So I'm quite happy to subsume the amendment into the motion. And on that basis, I would urge everyone in the meeting to support the motion as a substantive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fielding. So the amendment has been subsumed, so that means that it's been accepted by the proposer. So we don't have to have a separate vote on the amendment. So can I see those in favour of the amended proposition? Please show. Can I see those against? I don't think there are any. No. And as is traditional, I'll abstain. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Just as a quick comment, I didn't want to say this during the debate. A while ago, the MOD are difficult to work with, Ministry of Defence. I did some work because I realised across local government we had a desperate need of people coming out of the forces to give them jobs. It was good for local government. I found a headhunter who was prepared to put on courses and meetings with people to, as they came out of the forces, to show them the opportunities there were in local government for them to get a job. We went to the MOD to pitch it to them, not going to cost the Ministry of Defence one single penny, and the Ministry of Defence said no. And so I think if we can work, Councillor Pitt, working with them is tough. Anything that I'm sure people can do from all sides to help that, I'm sure we'd be extremely grateful. But the Ministry of Defence are often the barrier, not the thing that is going to help. Okay, thanks very much indeed. So that's the end of the motions. Just before we do questions, I just wanted to say a very public thank you to the events team for organising the Remembrance Sunday and the service at the Cenotaph today. I thought they did an extremely good job and they worked very, very hard. We tried to include more young people in this in things over the last couple of days, and the Lord Mayor's cadets have stood up really well to do that. My thanks to them. I think it's really important that the next generation know about why we do remembrance, and so each generation gets to know and understand it. But my thanks to all of the events team. When I came down and had lunch with the veterans, we had I think 200 or 300 veterans downstairs after the parade. They were really appreciative of what had been done, and they know Portsmouth does it well. So thank you very much indeed. We now move on to questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Heaney.
Yeah, point of order, Lord Mayor. Normally we have 45 minutes for questions, but we didn't have a council meeting last month, and there's a possibility that some of the questions may well have been put then. And I wondered if, because of that circumstance, we would consider extending the questions to the end of the questions, because there are only 7, and rather than having them hanging over or not being responded to. So I'm asking for a suspension of standing orders for the time to finish the questions, if that's okay.
So Councillor, I'm sure we can put that to the vote if you like. My recommendation to colleagues would be, let's see how it goes. It may well be that we're through this quite quickly, but if you'd like to force a vote now, you have absolute right to do so. But can I recommend to colleagues that we see how we get on and see if that's where we want to. Councillor Bosher.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. If you wish to extend the time, we need to have a vote to suspend standing orders to do that. With respect, we can't see how it goes and then have a vote on suspending standing orders halfway through.
Yes, we can, and Council Leader is exactly right. We can. We don't have to do this at the beginning. We can suspend standing orders at any point through, so we can suck it and see. Okay, so can I remind members there are 8 questions under Standing Order 17 and they're being previously circulated. We know the 45 minutes in the Standing Order. Can I remind everybody that the member asking the original question can ask for 2 supplementaries and must be directly arise out of the original question or the answer. Any other member is limited to 1 supplementary and has the same thing. Question 1 is from Councillor Gerard. It will be answered by Councillor Dorrington with a written reply, which will be circulated to all members. Is that correct, Councillor Dorrington? Thank you very much indeed. Question 2, Councillor Fielding to Councillor Hunt. Councillor Fielding.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Question number 2, my name.
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Fielding. I must admit, I haven't had any sent to me, but I made inquiries with the officers, and the officers advised me that the environmental health look at about 100 complaints a year in the postcode areas. So basically the bottom third of the city, which includes Central South Sea Ward. There were 29. So that's from Old Portsmouth across to Eastney, 29. In the middle section of the city, still on Portsea Island, there were 42. And in the top half of the city, off the island, but still in Portsmouth, there were 18. I do very much recall that when I was in the chair before, I think I still do allotments actually, but we worked with allotments who used to have quite a lot of bonfires, and we forbid them and we decided to try and move it to once a year, and I think that's even stopped. So I've got a reply here. I can send it to you if you wish, but it's about 100 a year. Basically, if there is a complaint, the officers do go and look. Usually a warning letter is sent, and if you can't identify which property it was, they do a drop around the area pointing out to people that this can be antisocial. It is not against the law. There is no ban against having a bonfire. I would like to take this opportunity, however, to say to anybody who wants to set fire to green stuff or wood, especially this time of the year, I would urge you to check anything that you're intending to burn that's been around for a little bit of time, to check it for hedgehogs, slowworms, other forms of mammals, even cats who will get away quick. But check it before you burn it, because you don't want to kill things unnecessarily. You know, hedgehogs are an endangered species in this country now, for goodness sake. We used to have them in our garden, getting under this shed. But yeah, so I'm a big fan of hedgehogs, and I hope people, when they do make these bonfires, they check them really carefully for what's in them. So I think I've answered your question reasonably fully. If you've got a supplementary, I'm happy to respond to it, but I can send this to you later on. It tells you how to report things and so on.
Thank you. Councillor Fielding, supplementary.
Yeah, it was, I will formulate this into a question, but trying to explain the situation as well, because it was a number of houses along a stretch of terraced properties that backed onto other terraced properties. So you've got a situation where you've got quite short areas of backyard and garden. It was merely just what can we do other than suggesting people report these into the council to ensure that they're investigated properly. There's probably not a lot more we can do other than signposting people.
Councillor Hunt.
Well, you refer them to the My Portsmouth app, and if you go to Other, you can put the report on there, and any report will be investigated. But without knowing the actual location, I can't advise any further than that. But I'm quite certain that if a complaint was made, that knowing the environmental health team and trading standards and so on, the way they work, it will have been followed through. But if you subsequently want to write to me about the actual location, well, it's past now, but yeah, tell residents to go to my app, Portsmouth app, and then go to Other and make the report there, and then it will be followed through. If it's not, I'll be very glad to hear from you.
Thank you very much indeed. Anything else, Councillor Fielding? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Next question.
Did you turn me off, Lord Mayor?
I often do. Councillor Smythe to Councillor Candlish.
Mayor, my question is, why does the number 18 bus still use Kent Road to get from St Jude's Church to the end of Castle Road, when there is a better, arguably, route which is hardly any longer via Portland Road and Osborne Road? My question is for Peter Candlish. Thank you.
Councillor Candlish.
So thank you for the question, and I'll try to answer it as best I can. So the number 18 route was extended in April to go down to Clarence Pier and also made more frequent. And so far, it looks like it's going to be a success, although it takes about 18 months for you to really know whether a new bus route has been successful. It's part of a wider programme to improve bus services across the city, which we've got from the adopted Portsmouth Transport Strategy, which priorises buses as a key way of tackling some of the issues that we face around the city in terms of parking, congestion, air quality, and so forth. The choice of route for the number 18 to go from the seafront to Palmerston Road or vice versa is because it is the shortest, quickest and most direct way to travel between those points. Using Kent Road brings more people close to a bus stop, and that's in line with the transport guidance given to us by the DFT, because we know that distance from the bus stop is one of the key drivers about whether you actually use the bus. So it's bringing the bus close to people. We're also looking at introducing a new bus stop on Southsea Terrace. That will also, by using this route, bring buses very close to businesses along Castle Road. And you have to think also about the wider implications of all of these choices on the operations of buses across the city. And it's these sorts of often quite technical operational reasons which are some of the reasons behind why we've been able to bring the amount of bus travel up by 41% in the last 2 years. For example, the 23 service serves Osborne Road every 10 minutes with 6 buses an hour using these stops in each direction. The 18 also serves Osborne Road, and there will be 10 buses an hour using these stops in either direction, with the timetables just being 1 minute apart. So this would just lead to congestion going to Osborne Road, as there is insufficient space at the Queen's Hotel bus stop to accommodate 2 buses simultaneously, and that would be a negative on the total system. Resolving this by adjusting the timetable of either the 23 or the 18 to mitigate that would have wider negative impacts across the wider system, because the buses are actually going in huge loops around the city. So making one small change in one place has knock-on consequences elsewhere. And the 23 originates in Havant and the number 18 in Paulsgrove. However, I have heard from local residents who are concerned about this change that's brought the number 18 to them. And there is currently a range of data collection and other studies going on to look at the issues that are being caused. To find out if there are any ways that we can keep the benefits that we're getting from doing this and address some of the issues that are being raised. Interestingly, as they've got into that, some of the reasons that are coming out actually relate to things like antisocial, poor driving behaviour, which is not really related to buses, but is related to general driving in the city. And similarly, it's not just buses, there are also issues when heavy vehicles of any sort go down the route, though obviously buses are one example of that. So when we got all this information together, just as we do across the city on all the bus routes at all the time, if you've got reasons to do anything different, we will look at doing so. But I would also say that it takes a long time to establish these things because buses build up a clientele and a local understanding, because to be truthful, the issues that are down there on Kent Road are not very different to issues that occur all over the city. The issue is that this is a new area that's being served by buses that wasn't served before.
Thank you, Councillor Candlish. Councillor Smythe, a supplementary.
Supplementary question. You know my support for the bus service. I'm not anti-bus and I use buses all the time and I live very close to this. Are you aware that there is no bus stop in Kent Road, so it's be quite easy to serve the end of Castle Road from the new stop, which I notice has already been put up this morning, I saw, by coming down, turning to Osborne Road? And are you aware of the advantage of people being able to change buses at Osborne Road rather than having to walk? I don't think it's very far because I'm a walker, but a lot of people find it a quite long way to walk to from St Jude's to Osborne Road to change buses. So are you aware of the benefits of being able to change buses? And second of all, are you aware of the access to the bus stop at the end of Castle Road? It's hardly any further to drive, as there are no stops in Kent Road, which might which might be a justification. And are you aware of the accidents and the other incidents that have occurred? Some of it I agree with, inconsiderate driving on all sides, but this is a quiet road, narrow road, and a road where there are a lot of children coming out of schools, and there's a lot of fear and surprise that that has been chosen as an adequate bus route. I wonder if you're aware of those things and how you're going to deal with them.
Councillor Candlish.
So I am definitely aware of all of those issues. I've got, as you quite well suspect, and as is so common when any kind of transport change is made, there's a lot of people who have strong opinions about these things. You asked quite a lot of things in that supplementary, so I'm hoping that I'm going to try to answer them all. Forgive me if I miss something, and I don't know whether the Lord Mayor would give you another shot to correct me on the ones I missed. So, I've made a note there were 3 key things to give back to you. So the first thing is, I accept there isn't a bus stop on Kent Road, but the piece that I tried to give him, the answer that I tried to give my former answer was that from an operational basis, it is the shortest, most direct route to transit that area, and it's bringing a new area of the city into being close to buses. I'm trying to read my own handwriting here, the notes I made as we were going along. I believe my third point says that many of the issues that have been raised by people are concerns for them as the local people, but that is often the case with any kind of transport implementation. There are the effects immediately, there are the effects across a wider area, and then there are the effects across the whole city. And truthfully, it's about balancing all of those things up and coming to a determination. So before this route was proposed, there was work done by both the bus company and indeed back-checked by the council officers to ensure that this road was suitable for taking bus services. It passed all of those kind of tests in just the same way that there are other roads across the city where, you know, roads are narrow, buses going through them. People are not always immediately happy about that. But there was no reason why this could not be. And I go back to the bigger thing, which is, if you look at it big picture, this route is being a tremendous success. So although I said the number 18 route, the overall bus usage is up 41% in the last 2 years. I think off the top of my head, the number 18 is up by 70%, and it's also moved to a commercially sustainable basis. And that's before we've had a couple of summers of actually being able to run people from the north of the city all the way down to the seafront at Clarence Pier. So I'm hoping that the issues that people have felt as a new thing as it being introduced will wear off over a period of time, and that the expected incremental usage of the buses, which we all agree I think is a good thing for the city, actually materialise. So we are watching.
Thank you very much, Councillor Candlish. Councillor Smythe.
Is there a sort of a time when your report from the experiment that you've been doing is going to be considered, and will there be more opportunities for the people of Kent Road, who've actually, overwhelming numbers of them have signed a petition and written to you? Will there be an opportunity for reconsideration of that, given that in this instant the bus would serve exactly the same route and would be supported by the same people, and maybe more, because the people would want to change in Osborne Road? There's no implication in my views why I'm attacking a whole bus service. In fact, I might even like a stop of the same bus down my street, which is much longer and doesn't have a stop on it. But just simply a bus going through a street isn't a service. The service is at the bus stops, and they can remain exactly in the same place. Is there an opportunity for further public consultation on this?
Councillor Candlish.
So quite a few things in that one as well. So in terms of the report, I'm getting information together all the time. We've already done some data monitoring to check for things like congestion and so forth. So I would expect to have that report completed and with me in the next few weeks. In terms of having a consultation about it, bus stops and bus routes are not the same as parking, EV charge points, or many of the other things that come into my inbox. There is not a formal consultation process about it. It's actually an operational decision by the bus companies. So I don't think there's going to be a formal consultation, but I am aware that the residents of that area want some feedback and sort of justification about why we're doing it, and I will ensure that that happens.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mason.
Councillor Candlish, once the you have this forthcoming report, would you be willing to meet with representatives of the residents of Kent Road to see what can be done to mitigate the problems which they have brought to our attention as ward councillors?
So two things to that. Oh, sorry. Yes, I have left my light on. Thank you, Lord Mayor. The 2 points on that are, yes, I would be happy to meet. They have already been met on site, or some representatives have already met on site with officers. I would be happy to go down and talk to people as well. And I cannot even begin to read the second note I've written, so my apologies.
So, new career as a doctor, Councillor Candlish?
Mitigation measures. So, part of the purpose of doing the investigation work that's going on at the moment is to see what can be done to mitigate some of the issues. You have to sometimes do things to see all of the impacts, and we're talking to people like the school roundabout. We're looking at the layout of the road. There may be some things we can do, and that's what I'm looking to get the report upon.
Thank you very much, Councillor Candlish. Councillor Heaney.
Yeah. Will the mitigation measures potentially include any changes to the parking on Kent Road?
That is possible. There are lots of options that are there. As you will well know, Councillor Heaney, putting new bus routes into an area is to touch one live rail. To touch parking is to touch another live rail. And to not address congestion and air quality is a third live rail. It is not always easy being the Cabinet Member for Transport because you have to balance all of these things out. So, yes, it will be on the table. What comes from all of that, I'm not in a position to say at the moment.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's move to the next question, question 4, which is from Councillor Madgwick to Councillor Pitt.
Thank you. Can the leader assure members that in light of the recent rumours of the county election delays, that our authority will not be requesting a delay in our 2026 local elections in Portsmouth and would not support such a delay?
Councillor Pitt.
The short answer is yes, I can make that assurance. There is 2 additional points, though, that I'd like to add. The Cabinet, when we met on the 28th of October, added that as one of the recommendations when we looked at the devolution discussion to make sure that that was not, to make it very, very clear that's not something that we would contemplate. But I do think it's also important because I see stuff on social media where people are saying that it's undemocratic because our elections were postponed this year and they live in Portsmouth. That is not true. No local elections have been postponed in the city of Portsmouth. We elect, as you all know, in thirds, and this was our fallow year with no elections. So we have not postponed elections in Portsmouth. We will not be asking to postpone elections in Portsmouth. And if the government suggested that we should postpone elections in Portsmouth, we will say no.
Thank you. Councillor Madgwick?
Perfect response.
Thank you. Councillor Candlish?
It's a question. Is Councillor Pitt aware that Hampshire's Lib Dem MPs have actually asked the government in writing to confirm that there will be elections, but has so far not received a response?
Yes, I am aware of that letter. Obviously, that relates to the elections of the county council, which were postponed this year. I agree with our Liberal Democrat MPs that they should not be postponed further.
Okay. Question 5 is to Councillor Ashmore, who is not well and is here, therefore not here. So that will be getting a written response. Okay. Is that okay, Councillor Dunn? Good. Well, yes, it's polite to ask. Okay. Question 6, Councillor Heaney to Councillor Hugh Mason.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Have any discussions taken place involving either council officers or members with the developers of the former John Lewis building about the lack of progress on the development? And if so, what has been the outcome?
Councillor Mason.
It's an interesting question because we have to realise that this is a commercial venture, and there's often some of the things which will have been discussed will be commercially sensitive. But may I give you the general background? Knight and Lee closed in 2019, and that group put in an initial indication of their plans in September 2019. Planning permission was granted in 2020. However, in 2021, the building was graded to listed, and so we had to have a rethink, and listed building consent was given in August 2022. Since then, there has been considerable work done on the interior of the premises, but there have been a number of things which have slowed this up to the current pause. These included, and probably one of the major causes, was the problems and the reorganization of Brimore, who are the contractors. So recently, very little development has taken place, which I think is the background to your question. Until the development was paused, there was continuous discussion with the planning authority. Since then, the site owners have had discussions with the property and investment team, with the Section 151 officer, Mr. Ward, but the council has been unable to achieve an outcome from a development perspective, and nothing is being arranged at the moment. So things are still paused. They may have to be changed because the building consent was August 2022, and that's, like all planning, for 3 years. So, where we are is that there have been discussions, and that the leader and the Member of Parliament for Portsmouth South have both been apprised of the situation on a need-to-know basis. The MP was fully apprised of this with a major discussion in May 2025. So there have been discussions going on. We are open to discussions. We are trying to get further discussions. We want to get this moving as fast as possible. I believe the owners of the site wish to get the thing moving as fast as possible, but at the moment it remains largely paused. I trust that is acceptable as an answer.
Thank you very much. Councillor Heaney, have you a supplementary?
Yes, Lord Mayor, I do. When the Debenhams site development was delayed, the City Council started a process for compulsory purchase. It went to the Cabinet and the Lord Mayor was then leader. Has the Council considered that as an option to speed up the development?
We considered and took action on the Debenham site because nothing had been started, nothing was happening. The situation in Knight and Lee is somewhat different. There was a considerable amount of work undertaken. The work, we are told, is paused for operational reasons, and so it would not be appropriate to take the type of action which we took with Debenhams, and indeed I'm not sure it would be lawful to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Heaney, do you have a second supplementary?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. Do we know and are we able to say whether there is any potential for the site to be sold on to another developer to proceed with the development and possibly a new application, maybe a planning application?
There is always the possibility for a site to be sold on. And some of us might think that that would be, in some ways, quite a good idea. But there is no way in which, even if this were the case, and even if the leader and the Member of Parliament were apprised of the matter under strict confidentiality, that we could make that public at any time. So the answer is, I don't know, and I don't think there is any way I could know.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Mason. A question from Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Would the Cabinet Member agree with me that the changes made by the last government to the borrowing terms for the Public Works Loan Board, which, while in good intentioned at the time to restrict some councils from irresponsible borrowing, it does mean that councils who want to invest in their local area, such as Portsmouth, are limited in our ability to do that, and that would fetter our ability to enter into any kind of proposal to support the development directly at this point. And if that is the case, is it not clear that since the Debenhams development is coming forward and is due, from everything I can see, to be it is being marketed and those apartments should be occupied by next year, that in itself should be the impetus for the Knighton Lee site to be developed, because clearly there is not market failure in the area, which is one of the prime conditions around the council getting involved for a compulsory purchase order.
There are two parts to that. The first, yes, the changes in borrowing rules have made things much more difficult for councils, and certainly looking at many of the developments which we hope to bring forward in the local plan, some of those will be possibly delayed, but certainly will be more difficult because of the changes in borrowing requirements. The second part considers the viability of the Knighton Lee site. I think that there is little doubt, on the basis of the success of Debenhams, the Debenhams Southsea development, that there is a ready market, that this could be developed. And indeed, I believe Vale Williams have still got it on their website as being offices available at a future date.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. Can the Cabinet Member confirm Portsmouth City Council does not own this property, but is trying to bash heads together to try and get it moving?
Point one, we do not own the property. Point two, that would be commercially sensitive. I think the bashing of heads together and the breaking of skulls is a commercially sensitive and probably in every other respect a sensitive matter.
Councillor Fielding.
Thank you. Is the Cabinet Member aware that the current owner/developer of the John Lewis building has a number of sites in Torquay, Bournemouth and in other parts of Portsmouth that are sitting bare, and is he concerned of possible land banking?
I am aware that they have a number of sites. I am also aware, very well aware, of the way in which the market for the type of development in which they specialise has changed since COVID. It is now much more difficult to do the type of development which they were originally envisaging than it is now. I do not know whether this would constitute land banking, but it certainly has constituted difficulties for the group.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on to question 7. Councillor Smythe, Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. Can Councillor Pitt confirm, update us on whether the Southsea Farmers Market might soon cease trading in Palmerston Road? And if so, what steps are the council taking to stop this happening?
Interest. My nephew is a trader he makes brilliant cheese like Old Winchester, which is fantastic for Christmas dinner. But yes, he's involved with Hampshire's Farmers Market. It's not prejudicial, I think, but I need to make that.
Is a nephew making cheese a prejudicial interest?
He's a senior cheese maker. He's brilliant.
So, microphone.
I think you can run a sort of Wallace and Gromit defence. I think it's not a prejudicial interest at all.
Okay, and The question is he Wallace or Gromit? Councillor Pitt.
Oh, yes. Okay. I guess we ought to start by saying that other cheesemakers are available. And for those of you old enough, blessed are they. Sorry, I couldn't resist. I can do the whole script if you want me to. The question is slightly different to the answer that I need to give, because you talk about the Southsea Farmers Market, and I do need to be specific that we are talking about the Hampshire Farmers Market in Southsea. Okay. So the PCC Markets team have been meeting monthly with the Hampshire Farmers Market business manager since January this year. We've been monitoring the performance because trader numbers have been dwindling this year. Alresford Hampshire Farmers Market is now on the same day, and we've been asking if that's been having an impact on their ability to draw traders to Southsea. HFM has said not, and in fact now the Alresford numbers are also dropping. However, an additional market in Whiteley, Hampshire Farmers Market in Whiteley, started in October. So in attracting traders, there is clear competition on the same day. Number of traders had been hovering at around 5 to 8 each month in Southsea, and negative feedback from visitors regarding from them about the number of visitors visiting them. But obviously, it becomes a sort of doom loop with they have less traders, less people come, etc. Footfall is not, however, significantly down. So because we have footfall counters in the area, so that does indicate that the decrease in the offer is drawing less people directly to the market itself. But losing Knightley and Debenhams will have undoubtedly not helped, but may be counterbalanced by new residents moving into Debenham shortly. There's actually been a 2% increase in footfall year on year. So this number of people is not necessarily the actual problem. But there's not now a steep increase as there used to be when the Hampshire Farmers Market is in Southsea. And our current estimates show that it's approximately only about 200 extra visitors on market day, which is really poor. So less traders with a reduced offer could be a direct cause of less footfall at Hampshire Farmers Market. Locals will travel to other locations. If there are more traders, better offer in other locations, e.g. Alresford. But I've also travelled to Emsworth when stalls that I used to like to see in Southsea have moved there instead. So, I doubt if I'm alone. Isle of Wight tomatoes. Love Isle of Wight tomatoes. They've also left Southsea and they don't trade at other markets as much either. Uptake on pitches in Southsea is very low. Anecdotal story that Southsea is expensive to attend. However, the Hampshire Farmers Market website sets out a fixed cost for all pitches at their markets of £48 plus their annual membership fee, no matter the location. So there's no evidence to support that Southsea is dearer. And the markets team check the precinct, hook up power and bollards, and each market. After each market, and they meet with Becky Alexander every month. Hampshire Farmers Market currently do not pay for space used or make any financial contribution to Portsmouth City Council, and they're the only market in the city that make no contribution to the council, and yet we do support them. So it is absolutely not the case that the council has in some way done anything to price them out. We offered alternative dates and frequency in 2026 to try and encourage them further, but that's been declined by Hampshire Farmers Market. We then opened a discussion with them regarding making an income contribution, and they responded that they would only do that if their trader numbers are over 20, and yet they can't attract traders to Southsea. They also however, they did request attendance and space at the 2026 Southsea Food Festival, but they've been told that they will need to pay to be there because of the cost of delivering the event. So as there are usually over 30 traders at the festival, they are comfortable to pay that charge in 2026, so they will be there. Other market providers pay for space in Southsea each time they provide a market. Everyone will know of Love Southsea, of course, including pilot markets and new markets. And the recent plant-based market in October paid PCC £22 per 3x3 pitch and was a success. Hampshire farmers a Hampshire Farmers Market trader approached PCC Markets team with news of a small group of traders who wish to continue trading in Southsea. And the PCC team have discussed this with Hampshire farmers, and Hampshire farmers are comfortable that those traders book in with the Love Southsea Markets, and that Love Southsea Markets also support that approach. So Love Southsea Market pitch fees are slightly cheaper. They're £40 rather than 48, so that might be helpful to them. But I have to say that Hampshire Farmers Market are now informing their traders that Southsea is not a viable market beyond the end of this year. So if there is a sudden influx of bookings or the traders push back and say they want to keep the market going, then we'll enter into a new discussion. But unless Hampshire Farmers Market contribute in some small way to PCC, they just will not be able to come anymore. So, in a nutshell, we have an opportunity here to reinvigorate the market. Hampshire farmers do not feel currently, to me, or the markets team, like the vehicle to do that. There is absolutely no reason why traders have stopped coming here, but they have stopped coming. So I'm not going to get into a detailed rationale as to why that may not be the case, but you'll probably be aware, Councillor Smythe, that we run a really successful Eat the Island event in the lead up to Southsea Food Festival each year, and that is all about showcasing and prioritising our producers, our local producers, and pushing for the products that they sell. It's also the case that we do want a producers' market in Southsea that showcases the best of what Hampshire has to offer. So the Council is committed to finding a different route to do that. It just feels that currently there is no route to doing that with Hampshire Farmers Market. I hope that's a comprehensive answer.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smythe.
Thank you very much. You've anticipated my two supplementary questions, but I will nevertheless just ask one, which is, should we make a special approach to the Isle of Wight tomatoes? Because I think people are not going to the market because the Isle of Wight tomatoes is not there again, and like you, I think they're the most wonderful tomatoes in the world. But thank you for your full response.
Well, I never thought I'd just ask a question specifically about tomatoes. Blessed are the tomatoes. Yes is the answer, because we will be opening the doors and promoting to all of the people who have been at Southsea at one point or another and saying, do you want to come back? We've got different dates and a different opportunity for you. And Love Southsea have been very clear that they will do everything they can to help us make this a success.
Thank you very much indeed. Final question from Councillor Smythe to Councillor Candlish.
This is a fairly simple question. Can the Cabinet member, Councillor Candish, provide an update on the closure of the alleyway on the western edge of Wimbledon Park? Will it be reopened for the public to use soon?
Councillor Candlish.
So, it is not so simple as you might think, because this one threw me into some confusion. So, judging by the mood of the chamber, I shall give the abbreviated answer, which is, I was down there this morning. So, it had been closed off at the northern end to the southern end. The northern end is still blocked. The southern end is blocked 2/3 of the way down, so there is a clear route through the park to the centre. So there is no real loss of amenity to people getting down there. Indeed, one of the reasons why it was closed, I believe, was potentially antisocial behaviour, or it could have been dog dirt. That's the bit I really don't know. So the short answer is it is still blocked in that top bit, because there's also an issue about potential things falling off the side of the building, which is a safety concern. But other routes are available, and no biggie.
Councillor Smythe.
Do you have any idea when it's going to be opened? There are a number of people who use it, particularly people who are not keen with walking through the park where there are dogs that they fear.
Councillor Candish, could you direct your microphone? It's just we don't want to lose your words for posterity or for the 1,033,000 people who are watching.
Is that better?
No, exactly the opposite.
It was a 50-50 bet, and I lost.
Stop. Yes.
When I thought it was a 50-50 bet, I was wrong. I don't know when it's going to open, because that section, there is a building concern about bits falling off the building, and that's being looked at as part of the total plans to extend the life of the centre. So until that is resolved, it is likely to remain closed. However, the deviation that people have to do is very small, and to be honest, I'm not sure that people would feel any better about walking down what is a very, very narrow, dark, possibly filled with dog dirt alleyway, versus going through the park, which is just next door.
Councillor Smythe.
Quick question, will you keep people informed?
I'm happy to do so. I'll be absolutely honest, I didn't know about this until you raised the question. So I will look to use local ward councillors to disseminate the information if I have a better answer to give.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's meeting. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Jeffrey?
Extended the meeting or not?
We're not extending the meeting. There is no need. All questions have been answered within the time allocated. So thank you very much indeed for everybody's good humour. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Stannon. I hope you've enjoyed your first meeting. Thank you and good night.